Deep inside a massive castle in a far-off land, a summoning from another world just went down as steam hissed through the entire room. A bunch of random people suddenly spawned in the middle of the room with no idea how they got there, including a terrified girl in a school uniform who was just on her way to class a second ago. This kingdom has been getting crushed by demons for years, and now they're officially on the brink of a total disaster. They summoned powerful warriors from another world to crush their enemies. And this 18th generation of legendary heroes did an epic job answering the king's call. These random people have no idea what's happening, and the only thing they're focused on is why they're being called heroes. Everyone in the kingdom is hyped to show off what they can do. Right in the middle of the crowd, there's a girl with a super rare ability. It's the Divine Scythe. The girl was totally caught off guard when the magician pointed her out, making everyone turn their heads to stare. While checking out the rest of the group, they discover yet another person with a super rare. The king screams that skills are actually divine gifts meant only for people summoned from another world to serve them, and these legendary warriors are known as heroes. The crowd is super confused, but they're also hyped out of their minds. These heroes have crazy powers, but they just got pulled into a whole new world. Momoko tries to deny it, but a villager cuts her off to reveal she has the Divine Scythe skill, which can delete high-level demons with just one swing. The king is super hyped that everyone in the group has such sick skills, and as a subordinate calls out to him, it's clear this new batch of heroes is the real deal. The robed guy bows to his lord and introduces Norio, but then he drops the bombshell that this hero has 0 powers, and the status window proves he's totally empty. The king spots Itinerami and stays totally silent, while the guy just waits in a super awkward pose to see how his lord reacts. Just your typical busy day in the city. Crowds of people are rushing around, heading down into the subway to get where they need to go. The whole place is packed with massive skyscrapers and office. Norio lets out a massive sigh, dreading another soul-crushing day as a corporate slave. The subway is totally packed, and as he squeezes onto the train, he realizes this is the last place on Earth he wants to be. The train is totally stuffed, so he gets annoyed and shoves his way in to avoid waiting, only to smash his nose right into a super chubby guy. He looks around trying to figure out where he is, and then this guy just introduces himself as God. Autonomy was totally obsessed with the idea of his own death. But then God drops a bombshell. The kid is being sent to a different world. And get this, his dad is actually Zeus. Athena's the boss, but since the other gods complained she was being unfair to guys, this chubby dude ended up taking care of the clueless items instead. Norio asks about the summoning boss again, totally clueless about what's coming, until a god named Festus steps up, says he's a pro at this, and drops a super weird. Hephaestus was totally ready since this was his first time ever giving out a skill, but Etonami was so nervous he said he might not even take it if the power was too insane. Hephaestus shows off the new skill he made called Master of Excellence. He reaches out his hand, holding a glowing, shiny orb. But Norio looks totally disappointed with this gift from a... The guy warns him the skill is super hard to master, but he's sure the kid can do it, which only makes Itans freak out even more. Hephaestus presses the sphere against the guy's chest, bragging that he poured his soul into this ultimate skill, and the hero promises to push it to the absolute limit in his new world. He remembered his talk with God right before arriving, while everyone else was freaking out because he had 0 skills, which was a total first for this world. Itanami looks back at the king, realizing that without any real skills, humans are basically dead meat against demons. Norio tries to ask a question, but King Milord screams for silence and shouts that nobody is ever going back home. The boy tries to keep his mouth shut, but Momoko freaks out and repeats that they can't go home, and Meloid finally admits they know how to bring heroes here but have 0 clue how to send them back. The Demon King is the only one who knows how to get everyone back home. That's why the heroes have to charge the front lines and crush his army. But Utonami says he's... Nuari stepped up with a wild suggestion. He straight up asked the king for a piece of land to call his own. He's tired of being a nobody and wants to finally change his... He doesn't care how far he has to go as long as he gets his own land to live in peace. And since there's no turning back, he's officially ditching his soul-crushing office life for good. He's super hyped to kick off his new life, but the king's guards are completely stunned that this hero is acting so cocky when he literally has 0 skills. Itanami and the guide look out over the massive, empty wasteland, and starting right now, this whole desert is officially under his control. The guy explains that the prince bought this place as a gift and even paid his salary, so now he's free to live here however he wants. Getting knighted and handed some wild land means it's not even part of the kingdom, and Itami has no clue that kings usually just buy land for their heroes. The guide says this is a total win because since they're outside the kingdom's borders, the king hasn't explored here yet, which means the boy doesn't have to pay him a single dime. Itanami is super hyped to finally start farming, but then the guy sticks his hand out and demands cash for the tour he just gave. The guide grabs his cash and ditches him, saying the kingdom is done with him and the kid can go do whatever he wants, even if he dies. Nori says goodbye, feeling totally guilty that they're paying for him, especially since he doesn't have the skills they actually need to fight the demons. Looking out at that massive empty valley, I realized my whole life was starting over right then and there. Most heroes go on big journeys with their friends to beat the final boss and get famous. But this kid honestly couldn't care less about any of that. Itani starts his journey thinking the king and his subjects are basically just a bunch of desperate people. While walking past some empty boulders, he realizes he could actually have a pretty chill life out here. He never wants to run into those guys again, so he's looking for a spot as far away from the kingdom as he can get. He stands right by the ocean, soaking up the cool breeze and thinking there's absolutely nowhere else he'd rather be. He waved his arms around in pure joy, finally feeling free, and screamed that he was staying to turn this whole place into his own kingdom. Nori needs to secure some water before it becomes a huge problem, so he sits on the rocks to taste it and make sure it isn't just salty seawater. He scooped a bit into his hand for a quick taste and realized it was actually super fresh lake water. He was hyped to see tentacles poking out from under the rocks. But then he realized octopuses don't even live in shallow fresh water. He's totally over the mystery of the lake octopus because right now, his only priority is finding some food so he doesn't starve. He grabbed those tentacles to yank the creature out, but the ground was way too slippery, and he started sliding straight toward the water. Itanami pops back up from the water with his eyes wide in shock, and that same octopus is still stuck right on his head. He stood up and was totally shocked that the water tasted super salty, especially since it was completely fresh just a second ago. Itanami had to be 100% sure, so he reached down and scooped up another handful of water. With an octopus stuck on his head, he takes a sip and realizes the water is actually still totally fine to drink. He's grinning like crazy because the new world is totally awesome, and as he hops out of the water, he realizes everything's gonna be just fine, so he rips that octopus. After tossing the octopus into the container, Itanami realizes he's got 0 seasonings, so he just decides to cook it in plain salt water. Noari's hyped to start his very first fire, so he grabs his hunting knife and carves a hole and a notch into a dry stick. He jams the stick into the groove and spins it until it starts glowing. Then he dumps those hot coals right onto the wood he set up earlier. Itanami took a deep breath and poured every ounce of his soul into sparking his very first flame. The kid got straight to work and spun that stick between his hands like a madman, and when a fire suddenly blasted out on his very first try, it totally freaked out the machine since it definitely. A sea creature is boiling in a pot while Nori crafts some plates and chopsticks, and as they munch on an octopus tentacle, the army is totally stuck on how fast that fire started. Grinning like a boss, the kid is hyped about his survival skills, especially since the hearth god Hephaestus told him his power is the ultimate skill of superiority. Ngwari kept thinking about what the guy said, so he headed over to a field full of plants to see if it was actually true. He swings his sickle arm and shouts to unleash his master of supremacy power. A massive shockwave followed his hand, absolutely wrecking everything in its way. Autonomy was totally speechless. He couldn't believe he actually had that kind of power. The guys who gave him, he finally figures out how to live his best life, so he grabs a hoe to try the same trick he did with the sickle, and the second he slams it into the dirt, the same crazy. He leaned over to check out the ground after firing off his skill. The dirt was plowed so well that he didn't even have to do any extra work. The whole area turned out massive. Itanami figures out that the Master of Excellence gift from Hephaestus basically multiplies the power of whatever he holds in his hands. The guy knew this power made farming a total breeze, so his crops were about to blow up. He didn't just slack off though, he got straight to work. He even started planting these. Nori stands by his garden beds and finally lets out a huge sigh of relief, feeling super proud of his hard work, even though he has no clue what he actually planted. But waiting for his crops to grow was gonna take way too long, so he headed out to catch some fish for dinner. Itanami is just chilling on the beach fishing, and even though he knows working for the company would be way safer, he's got these crazy powers from her that let him control the waves. The kid thanks the Hephaestus for the epic skill, promising Noire that she'll finally get to feast on seaweed and rice one day. Just as he started daydreaming, something finally bit his hook, and he started yanking that line back with everything he had. The line pulled so hard he knew right away he'd hooked something absolutely massive. A girl with long hair suddenly bursts out of the water and takes the bait, catching Itanami completely off guard. He's totally stunned and just keeps yanking the rod back on autopilot, realizing he didn't hook a fish for dinner. He actually caught a girl. He saw her all tangled up in fishing line, but then he spotted her tail and realized he was looking at a legit mermaid. He snaps back to reality when the mermaid starts acting all high and mighty, calling him a peasant and getting totally triggered that he fished her up, so he stays quiet because she looks like she's about to lose it. She screams that since he caught her, he's gotta marry her now, because those are just the rules of the new world. Itans was done listening and lunged forward, closing the gap in a total flash. So this guy just landed himself a wife in another world. But the mermaid is absolutely livid that she got caught by some total hillbilly. For a high-class resident of Murph Oak, she's just sitting there with a hook in her mouth, sobbing because autonomy finally caught her, and it's totally not what the boy expected to see. Once she got that thing out of her mouth, the mermaid started sobbing because she was totally disgraced and knew things would never be the same again. Noari tries to tell her she's the one who got herself hooked, but she won't listen because mermaids are super proud and totally hate humans, so now he's stuck dealing with her. She starts screaming at him because she can't believe a regular guy actually dragged a mermaid like her to the shore like a common fish. And now that her pride is totally crushed, she's stuck on land forever. The mermaid keeps yelling that this is all karma and she's stuck being his wife, so now autonomy has to step up and look after her. This is all totally new to him, especially since he's heard that in this world, marrying someone from a different species is actually a huge struggle. One look at her tail and he knows marriage is totally out of the question, thinking there's no way her dreams will ever become real. She pulls out a bottle of some super weird liquid and starts taking sip after sip. The second she gulps down the elixir, a massive flash of light explodes from her side and totally blinds him. Her tail slowly transforms into human legs right in front of him, and the guy is completely losing it. He immediately spins around, blushing like crazy because she's standing there with absolutely nothing on. The mermaid flexes that she'll never be happy on land, but now she's got a chance to have a kid so the guy will finally stop complaining about her. Itunami screams that he finally gets it and begs for something to cover up with. He realizes he totally freaked out and just went along with things way too fast. Now she's super mad because he literally yelled that he won't marry her if she refuses to wear pants. But while they're standing by the flowers, Itanami explains this young guy showed up to plow the field, but he was shocked to see sprouts already popping up out of the ground. Suddenly, sprouts popped up in every single bed, totally shocking the boy and his future wife standing right there. He started thinking this might be that insane gift Fastest gave him, since he remembered being told he'd have total mastery over every single tool he touched. She got super curious about what her new husband was actually farming. The guy didn't even know if he was growing fruit or veggies. So, he headed over to finally see what was popping up. She calls the landlord a total headache, and even though Itonami acts like he knows nothing about fish, she gets that her husband just wants to live a chill life. Noir smirks and doubles down on her claim, proudly telling everyone they can totally count on her. Mermaids are naturally born healers, and this girl is a total pro at it. But the guy is completely clueless about what's going on, and she's getting super annoyed that She's super hyped and tells him to just ask if he's confused, but then she starts taking her pants off, making Utonami totally freak out from embarrassment. She sprints toward the water, yells that she's grabbing some stuff from the house, and dives right in, transforming back into a mermaid. He could only stand there and watch, wondering what the heck just went down. He headed into the forest, totally convinced this mermaid actually wanted to marry him, when all he really wanted was to escape his crazy life. Itanami wasn't sure she was ever coming back, so he grabbed a hatchet and got straight to work chopping down trees to build himself a simple house. A little while later, he looks at his simple creation with a proud smile, just enjoying the peace and quiet of being alone. He's totally stoked. He never thought he'd actually finish a whole house in just an hour. Noiri starts feeling like a total boss. He flops onto the bed to finally get some rest. As he's crashing after a brutal day, Itani starts thinking the mermaid is the reason he's so weak, and he figures she's never coming back anyway. Nori was totally passed out on his new bed when the girl suddenly showed up. He snapped awake just in time to see the mermaid dive into his arms, and since she'd taken that, Autonomy got all confused and told her to put her pants back on, but the girl was super annoyed because she absolutely hates wearing them. He asked her where she'd been hiding all day. He was totally freaking out about her, but she just gave him a look and walked away without saying a word. The mermaid crosses her arms and snaps that this isn't a human problem, since she thinks regular people don't care about anything anyway. On her way out, she mentioned she's actually a pretty bad cook. Hearing the word cooking totally grabbed the Eaton's interest. They were standing right in front of this. With a huge smile, she explains that mixing magic and potions creates medicine with all kinds of wild effects, and she even shows off a version that works for people who don't have any magic. Itonami asked about the cold medicine, and the girl bragged that she'd handle it once all the prep work was finished. The mermaid bolts to grab what she needs, and while the guy tells her to be careful, he's actually ready to call her out for lying. But before he can even say a word, She's already back showing off a massive fish. This tuna is named Ba-NG, and its meat is loaded with mana. But Nori has no clue about the magic. He's just losing his mind over how massive the fish. She slices that fish into pieces using only one hand like it's nothing. Itanami watches her and thinks her hands are basically actual swords. Now, the mermaid starts her cooking. Then she pulls out some bong fish fertilizer. But Wari is totally sketched out by the fishy stuff. If the kid uses this fertilizer on his farm, his crops are gonna grow in no time. The mermaid was super hyped and got straight to work. Itonami wondered what she was really up. Just one day later and boom, every single plant is covered in fruit. They're both completely floored by how crazy that fish fertilizer worked. The guy had already set up wooden stakes for the plants to grow on. He grabs a tomato right off the bush and decides. Idens is actually obsessed with eating his veggies, and he calls the girl a super rare kind of mermaid. But San is still watching him like a hawk because he's acting so sketchy. The girl grabbed a tomato off the bush to give it a shot, but one bite made her totally slump over. So Nwari had to step in and cheer her up since mermaids probably aren't big fans of human snacks. But he was dead wrong because his future wife thought it was delicious, and she was blown away that earthlings get to eat stuff like this every single day. The mermaid yanked a carrot right out of the dirt, dying to see if this one had a totally different flavor. Itanami stops her and explains that these veggies actually need to be cooked first. But the girl just whines that it's a total drag because she's acting out and just wants. Noir starts cooking the food right in the seawater while the mermaids chill on a rock next to the pot. He hands her the plate so she can finally taste how those same veggies get a totally new flavor when they're served together. Itanami is super nervous she'll hate his cooking, but the second the mermaid tastes the soup, her face lights up because it's actually delicious. As he grabs some soup, he's clearly loving life and wishing every single day could be this awesome. While she's still stuffing her face, she asks her fiancé if people really get to eat food this amazing every single day. Itanami stops them and says it's not quite right yet, suggesting they add some meat to the soup and create a secret signature spice to really make the flavor explode. The mermaid is totally blown away that the food could taste even better, but Nori explains that's just what happens when you add seasonings. But first, he's got to whip up some seasonings, so he's looking for miso and soy sauce to cook with all that meat he's already got. The kid grins and says he needs some gear too, while Itanami is so obsessed with the taste of those veggies that he's totally lost in food heaven. It suddenly hits him that he doesn't even know her name, but this mermaid-turned-human is actually called Plotty. Ida was about to introduce himself, but then he realized he might need a brand new name for this whole different world. Itanami flashed a big smile and introduced himself as Kadan, telling her he was super hyped to finally meet her. Plotty slurps down her food while staring right at her husband, and just like that, their wild daily life with a mermaid officially begins. Meet Kidan, an isekai traveler starting his new life with a mermaid wife. But he's already groaning and rubbing his sore back after a rough night sleeping on the hard floor. He saw Platy's bed was empty, and figured she'd already woken up before him. She might look human, but she's still a mermaid, and the guy is totally confused because seeing her sleep on that board makes her look just like a fish on a cutting board. Kidan's really hoping the mermaid isn't mad about getting hooked, so he decides to stop overthinking and just ask her straight up. Just as he's about to head out, Platy lets out a scream so loud it scares off every bird nearby, and when Kidan asks what's up, she points at a creepy scarecrow wearing a hat and wooden hands. He finally caught his breath and felt a huge wave of relief, realizing it was just a scarecrow he'd built himself for the very first time. Kidan explains that the thing is totally fake, but its arms actually move and it's got wooden swords for fingers just to scare birds away from the crops. She thinks this scarecrow can actually move to chase birds away, but the guy just laughs and tells her that's definitely not how it works. He stands in front of her and explains that if he stays in the field, the birds will think he's a person and stay away from the crops, totally missing the fact that the scarecrow is. He spins around and is totally shocked to see his creation moving, especially since he only built it to be a normal scarecrow to scare off birds. Kadan's jaw hits the floor when they actually start moving, and the girl is just as stunned because this is literally impossible, making him look at his hand and wonder if his crazy strength is behind it all. Platy wondered why he was staring at his hand, so her new husband finally dropped the truth and told her that a god actually summoned him here from a totally different world. Kidding realized the scarecrow's weird behavior was definitely linked to a power from God, and when the girl suddenly asked if he was a summoned hero, he was totally blown away that Platy crosses her arms with a smug look and says she totally knew that every single era uses magic to pull a hero from another world. She wondered if he was ready to be a hero and slay demons for the world, and the blushing boy totally agreed with her. She rolls her eyes and asks what a hero is even doing in a place like this. But the happy cat just chills by the crops and explains he's hiding because he's totally done with the hero life. The mermaid thinks this is totally weird, but the boy doesn't even care, just grinning with a fresh veggie in his hand while he listens to her talk. Platy asked if he was from a tribe that sticks together, because people from other worlds are usually so weak that a monster would take them out in a second if they were alone. The guy doesn't even try to argue with his wife, and even though she thinks he's someone special, he just brushes it off while chilling by the bushes, grinning with a... Platy couldn't figure out if this guy was actually a beast or just a total weakling, while right behind her, he was just vibing and snacking on a juicy tomato for breakfast. Still crouching there, he tells her he saw her sneak off earlier and got worried, which totally catches Platy off guard and makes her way too embarrassed to even give him an answer. She yells back that she's just going to the bathroom, thinking humans are way too nosy, while Keaton just shrugs, looking super embarrassed. He asks her where she even goes to the bathroom, but then it hits him. She just uses the ocean. After a quiet second, he finally processed everything, sat down, and realized he needed to dig a hole for a bathroom, but he totally forgot one massive detail about surviving out here. Humans are actually super weak when they're all by themselves. Even a tiny bug can be a threat, let alone a massive wild animal. He's so lucky to be living with Platy now, but out of nowhere, he starts wondering what she actually thinks about everything, and the time they spent hanging out together. Platy pops back in from wherever she went and holds out a plate to show off a starfish. Keaton asks what the heck is on the plate. The girl tells him it's actually a type of sea monster. She explains that this thing sucks up every bit of organic junk floating in. Platy says these things can actually clean water, but the kid still has no idea what these sea monsters are really all about. To show him how the sea cleaners work, she pulls out a pocket knife and holds it to her arm. Then she slices herself and lets her blood drip into the starfish tank while Keaton watches in. Platy looks super proud as he tells him to watch this sea monster, the sea cleaner, show off what it can really do. The cadet lunges forward and grabs her arm, squeezing her forearm as hard as he can to stop the blood. He's screaming his head off at her for what just happened, but, looking totally stressed, he tells her she's gotta stop, and once he finally chills out, he admits he's just super shy and awkward, so he says he's sorry for how he acted. Keaton is a total nervous wreck because of the power God gave him, but Platy shuts down his worries by telling him she actually really likes him. Now that she's his wife, she promises to always have his back, leaving Kadan totally shocked and blushing like crazy. The mermaid thought he'd be against it, but nope. She just crossed her arms and bragged that a wife's job is to always have her husband's back. He flashes a big grin and thanks her. She doesn't even answer, just turns away blushing with her nose in the air. The toilet is finally finished, and that's one more huge problem. Far across the sea, scary sounds echo from a rocky cave as a demon hiding in the shadows senses something dangerous coming his way. Platy calls Kidan over to flex her brand new look, swapping her old pants for a handmade skirt she just put together. She was rocking trousers yesterday, but now she's spinning around, showing off how she turned her old luggage cloth into a totally fresh outfit. He's stuttering and trying to say it's not worth the trouble, but she tells him to relax, since the mermaid thinks looking good for her husband is just part of the job and totally normal. Clutching her briefcase, she says she left ages ago, and just as Kadan is getting confused about where she's been, she gets a huge grin on her face and reveals she actually... The kid starts wondering what a dungeon actually is, picturing a place where you find loot, shop underground, or fight monsters until you reach the big boss on the top floor. He asked Platy what the deal was with this dungeon, but she told him it's way better to just see it and started rushing him to move faster. They finally reached this jagged, rocky cave that was way out in the opposite direction from where they lived. Kidden was totally wiped after hiking for 2 whole hours just to get to this cave. Platy actually stumbled onto this dungeon while he was just out working in the fields. Before he even knew what was happening, a huge gust of wind grabbed him and sucked him straight into the dungeon. Kidden felt like a giant invisible monster was licking his whole face, leaving Plate totally weirded out by his bizarre and shocked expression. This energy flows all over the planet, but in some spots it just stops and starts building up. This whole area is turning into a straight-up dungeon. The mana gets so thick that it literally morphs into a monster. Just like that, a beast is born right inside the dungeon. Kadana was shaking from head to toe as a sudden wave of heat hit her. Going into a dungeon like this was definitely going to end in a total disaster. There was no stopping Platy now. Wiping away his sweat, the guy was just hyped his wife could actually handle this. Obviously, clearing a whole dungeon is a massive challenge that takes serious skill. All she has to do, after that whole disaster, he knew he had to protect her now that they were officially married, so he told her to wait up, which totally caught her off guard since he hadn't. Kidden rushed straight to her side, telling her he was doing this for her husband and they were going together. As they step inside, the rough cave rocks suddenly turn into smooth brick walls. Bright torches line the hallway, lighting up the entire path ahead. The boy looks around and realizes this dungeon actually looks. She froze in her tracks when she saw a sketchy cloud of black smoke heading her way. The mermaid stayed on high alert, ready for anything. She screamed at Keaton to get out of there right. They've finally broken loose, and while the husband is totally frozen behind his wife, she's ready to throw down with these demons. The kid is paralyzed with fear, but she grabbed 3 tubes of mystery liquid and, after a quick sprint, chucked them straight at the beast. Those creatures just vanished into dust like a massive whirlwind, leaving nothing behind but their shadows. Kitten is totally blown away when the monster charging them just turns into dust, but Platy says the real craziness is only beginning. They only had 3 test tubes. One freezes them solid, one shocks the beasts with electricity, and the last one is a crazy acid that melts every single inch of their bodies until only the bones are left. Platy crosses her arms and brags that mermaids are pros at making battle potions too, but her husband is totally traumatized by what he just witnessed. She charges ahead and shreds the rest of the monsters, but Keaton calls her the real threat even though she just saved his life. He thought about his wife's crazy courage and knew he couldn't just leave this job to her. Besides, he didn't have any of his gear, so he was totally useless. Keaton snatched up the giant sword, stoked that his pro skills would make it hit like a truck. But as the girl started tossing his potions everywhere, he realized he might not even get. He called out for his wife to wait up, admitting he was totally wiped out but had already won and was heading home soon. So she just nodded and kept moving while he asked her for the final monster kill count. The girl is looking around the dungeon all panicked because the vibes are totally off, and the guy is actually paying attention to her. Just like she said, the dungeon is fine for now, but the big boss monster is lurking somewhere deep ahead. She turns to Feisky Dawn and swaps the title Commander-in-Chief Monster for just Boss, making things way easier for her totally clueless husband to understand. She's saying there's a boss in this dungeon, which is super rare, and the whole place is actually a total death trap. She breaks it down for Keaton, explaining that there are only 2 kinds of main dungeon bosses, and one of them is a dragon. Just like at the cave entrance, they're suddenly hit by a massive storm of magic energy. It's so intense that the guy actually gets knocked back a bit, but Platy doesn't. He's finally inside this dungeon. Something totally evil is creeping up on them. The crew stands their ground, waiting for the big boss to finally show up. Kidding asks Platy if they're looking at a dragon, but his wife overhears and warns them that this thing is actually way scarier. This is the big boss, the king of the undead who's got 0 life left in him. He's looming over them like a giant, creepy moon in the sky. Looking at his... Kadan is totally freaking out and asks what that monster is, so the girl gets ready to fight and tells him it's a super powerful magician or a high priest. Then you've got the immortal king, the ultimate boss of the undead who was born with insane magic and a genius brain. Running into a super strong undead king in a dungeon means you're basically dead meat, and it's gonna be a painful way to go. He's not about to let his life end before it even starts, so Kitan refuses to back down. The undead king breathes in deep and blasts out a wave of energy, saying he feels a weird vibe, and now he's gonna turn the boy into a living corpse so they can be best friends. She chucks her potions at the demon king, but even though his skull melts for a second, it instantly heals back with his crown, proving her potions are totally useless against him. Keaton saw the monster healing up, but the girl didn't even blink because she already knew this demon was straight up immortal. Staring down a deadly enemy, Plenty yells that she's got tons of potions and tells him to get out of there as fast as he can. As soon as he hears that, he wonders if he should just bolt to stay alive. He could actually make it out and live the life he always wanted. But he shouts at the top of his... He saw his potions weren't doing a thing, so he grabbed his sword and charged straight at the undead king. Kaiden screamed that he was her husband to save her, throwing himself at a magical monster that could end him in a split second. His words really hit her deep, and he immediately charges in like a hawk to end it. But the king yells for him to stop right before he lands the final blow. He just flopped onto the floor and said he was done, leaving Keaton and Plattis standing there totally speechless. The king is terrified of getting hurt, and he's totally shocked that the kid just unleashed the insane power hidden inside that holy sword. The kid is totally stunned and holds his holy sword right up to his face. Plotty just stays quiet and doesn't interrupt their talk. Then the monster asks him where he even got that. Suddenly, the death-looking monster realized Kidan had the holy sword from his dungeon, so Kidan apologized and tried to give it back. That undead king claimed the sword was his now. This holy blade actually has a mind of its own. It wants to pick its own master, and it just chose our main guy to be its... The undead king just lost his treasure, but he's actually relieved because it means his mission in this world is finally over. He begs the kid to kill him with the sword because he's cursed to live forever, and even though this blade is the only way to finally set him free, the boy refuses because he doesn't. He said he actually came from a totally different world. Back then, God gave him this crazy power to master every single tool he touches. That's probably why Kidon is able to swing. The monster dropped to its knees and screamed that this was the legendary gift from the gods, a power so insane it's way beyond any normal skill. Anyone who gets a blessing from God is officially a hero and part of the holy elite. The undead king bows down to a totally confused Kidon, then turns to the holy messengers and asks for a bit of their immunity. The guy is totally stunned and begs them not to rank him up, while Play T is hyped that her husband is being such a total boss. The undead king is super confused and asks why the guy even showed up, so Keaton explains he just moved in nearby, but then the girl jumps in and says their main job is just taking down monsters. She looked totally blissful as she explained that magic tools are made from monster fur and bones, and get this, some of them are actually delicious. Her husband was totally over her complaining because even though they were being treated like royalty, she only cared about how convenient it was to have a dungeon right next door. He's totally hyped and asks to go wild in the dungeon, and the king says yes because he was going to do it himself anyway, so these kids are actually doing him a huge favor. Plot Tie is super pumped that the undead king gave him the okay, and as they both stand there grinning, a totally shocked kid is just staring at them from behind. Seeing they were finally hitting it off with the king, the girl introduced herself in Kidon. She straight up asked to meet the evil spirits. He tried to answer, but then it hit him. He's pretty sure he was a big-shot church leader in his past life, and the mermaid is totally locked in while she listens to her new friend. After the church ditched him and hunted him down, he ended up in this dungeon where a monster sucked up all the mana and used a massive spell that totally finished him off. He was stuck there for hundreds of years, and even though he's finally free from the possession, he's totally forgotten his own name, which is so sad that it actually makes the couple feel so bad for the lifeless king because his whole story is just straight up tragic. The creature claimed he was just an old man who'd totally lost his will to live. But once those kids showed up, his soul-crushing boredom finally started to fade, and the king was definitely hyped about it. Kidon starts smirking, and Platy definitely catches him. He tells his new buddy he should totally drop by whenever he wants. They'd love to welcome him back with a feast. She leaned in and asked why he chose that name, especially since it belonged to a legendary priest back when he was still alive. Those words actually reached the dead king who'd been stuck in that dungeon for centuries after a curse took him out. And as he knelt there thanking them for being so nice, the group realized. As he's heading for the exit, Kidon totally panics and screams to his sensei that the sword won't let go, making the king burst out laughing while the girl realizes the blade is actually obsessed with him. And just like that, he's officially the owner of the holy sword. Keaton shouted that he finally finished it, looking totally stoked about what he just built. Plutty asked about her husband's new building, and he showed it off, explaining that it was actually a forage furnace. He unsheathes his holy sword and is blown away by its power since it slices through boulders like butter. But then the girl hints at the weapon's true secret purpose. The mermaid was super curious about why he was building a forge, so he reminded her about the gift he got from the lifeless king, Sensei. It clicked for Platy. This guy was actually talking about the special manner medal the sensei gave the boy to say thanks. She totally looks up to him as an awesome teacher, and the magic in this dungeon is so thick it actually hardens into super rare mana metal they can just take. Platy is super curious to see what he does next, because now that he's got this rare metal, he can finally craft the one thing he's been dreaming about forever, and he's... As Keaton hammers away, the girl is totally mesmerized, thinking that since this metal is pure mana, it's gonna be an epic magic sword worth way more than the usual 10 gold coins. He shows off his new gear, revealing a simple frying pan and a knife with a blade that's insanely sharp. Keaton is geeking out over his new kitchen gear like a little kid, leaving the girl totally stunned since she was expecting a legendary magic sword. But now she's actually getting curious about what. The kid starts breaking it all down, naming every single thing he's using, and since showing is way better than just talking, he jumps straight into the cooking. Kidon slices up the veggies with his knife and tosses them into a magic frying pan he literally just forged. He seasons the food like a total pro chef, and the girl is super hyped to finally get a taste. The kid whips up some fried veggies, a brand new addition to his menu. Pettis literally starts glowing and screams because the food is so sweet and tasty. But as she's digging in, the mermaid finally snaps out of it and can't believe he's wasting rare mana metal right now. But the boy is just obsessed with how it glows, stays warm without burning, and is super easy to clean. It's basically a total dream come true. Now he's got even more recipes to cook, and honestly, he looks way happier here than he ever did in his old world. Platy felt like she'd just been hit by a massive electric shock, and when she asked about the new recipes he was planning with his cool gear, He told her he definitely had some in mind but would need to find a few more ingredients first. She screams at him, demanding to know what else he needs, while he's just sitting there thinking about how much he's craving some meat. He's hyped for the food and says adding meat is going to change the whole game. She's super excited to finally taste it. Then, she asks him to go somewhere with her. They're trekking through the woods, and since Plotty's a mermaid, she's super hyped to finally see the mountain monsters she's been dying to eat. He gripped his sword thinking they'd hunt like normal people, but even though the girl knew there were birds and deer nearby, she only cared about cooking up some epic mountain monsters. Plotty's super hyped because she heard mountain monsters are actually delicious, and Keaton realizes these beasts are basically the ultimate trade currency in this world. She asks her husband what he thinks about caves, like how monsters are even born in there. Inside this cave dungeon, the undead King Sensei uses his powers to control the monsters and keep them from ever escaping. If there are monsters living here, then this whole mountain is basically a giant dungeon, and the girl is trying to explain it clearly so the guy finally gets it and stops asking so many questions. They freeze in their tracks, and the guy is totally blown away that a dungeon like this is just hiding nearby. Though he's low-key mad there aren't any normal animals around to cook up for dinner. As they push into the dark woods, a bunch of glowing eyes appear in the shadows, revealing a pack of monster boars that are definitely looking for a fight. Platty was totally hyped about the find, but Caden was sweating bullets since it looks like he'll never get used to this crazy new world. He's totally freaked out because these boars look ready to brawl, but the girl already knows they're called square boars. Bloody is literally jumping for joy because this place is awesome, especially since there are 2 dungeons right there. But Keaton is just standing there terrified and wondering why anyone would actually be happy about this. She whips out her potions and gets ready to scrap, telling her terrified husband to hold the line while she promises to end this fight in a flash. The boars started lunging at the guy with the holy sword one by one, and even though he wasn't ready for a fight, he had no choice but to step up and handle business. He swung that insane sword and dropped those beasts one by one without letting them get a single hit in. He's standing in front of a massive pile of monster corpses. Kidan is clutching his weapon, totally wiped out and gasping for air. Platty is jumping for joy, shouting. He wasn't even looking for a scrap and just said he got lucky since they attacked him one by one. But at least they're finally eating something besides veggies, and the mermaid is totally hyped to start cooking. They had a massive pile of meat, so she told him to chop it up for cooking, and while they used a potion to freeze it, Kidan decided to build a wheelbarrow and a fridge to store it all. After working for just a bit, the kid finished building a fridge and a wheelbarrow totally packed with supplies. He asks his wife about the ice potions, but she just crosses her arms and acts totally offended that he'd even doubt her, especially since she's got a massive stash ready to go. Keaton's actually tearing up because their lives are finally getting better, and he knows that's the only thing that matters to the girl. She listens in and tells him this will totally level up his cooking, so she tells him to hurry it up while he just laughs at his wife's reaction. Wild boar is basically just pork, and if he wants to turn it into the ultimate meal, he's making tonkatsu. He wipes away the drool while dreaming of that crispy tonkatsu, and his wife is absolutely fuming that he's actually having a good time in his head. He can't even sleep because he's stressing about running out of food again. Baking bread is going to be a total disaster now. The big issue is that they're completely out. He asks her if this world has eggs like the ones from back home, but she gets totally annoyed and says only humans do weird stuff like that since you'd never find anything like it in the mermaid kingdom. Plenty points out a crow that just landed in their field, but Kidden tells him that bird definitely isn't for eating. Then the girl comes up with a crazy plan to head back to the mountains and find that monster bird, but the guy is totally not down for it. While he's busy thinking about how he's got to slay those monsters, a massive beast is soaring through the sky right behind him, closing in faster and faster. Suddenly the guy feels this weird pressure from behind. He's totally confused. He spins around to see what's going on. The girl is just staring at the monster with her jaw on the... Platty thought it was just a bird or a plane, but Kidam realized it was a meteor zooming straight for them at insane speeds. The monster charged right at them in a massive swirl of wind, and while the girl actually kept her cool, Kid N was totally freaking out because they realized this winged beast was a straight-up dragon. He's coming for their souls because they broke into his dungeon, and as she points to the mountain, Plotty realizes it's actually the dragon's lair while Cadence just stands. As the dragon's wings whipped up a massive whirlwind around her, she realized this beast was definitely the boss of the entire dungeon. Shaking with fear, the boy screams at the mermaid about her promise that this dungeon had no boss, while she realizes he's actually drawn to the young man's insane strength. Her name is Grinsel Dragon Shroud, and she's demanding to know who broke into her Royal Mountain dungeon and wiped out her minions, even though she already knows this kid is the one. He shields his face and tries to talk his way out of it, claiming they had no clue the mountain actually had an owner. That massive winged beast is still looming right over them. Keaton starts begging for mercy and swears he'll never come back. But the dragon isn't even listening. To the Grinsel dragon trout. These weaklings broke into her home and did whatever they wanted, so now she's going to wipe them out for totally disrespecting her. Grinsel heads out to wipe away the mess they made, and since he's absolutely fuming, he lets out a massive blast of fire breath to burn them all to a crisp. Her fire blasts across the whole land like a massive shockwave, leaving Platy and Kaiden totally clueless on what to do next. The girl is totally freaking out because she thinks they're dead meat, but the guy finally snaps out of it and remembers he has his holy sword. He swings his weapon like a total boss, shielding Platy from the fire and taking the dragon's massive hit head on. He sliced right through the fire chasing them, and if he'd been even a second slower, they would have been toast. Shroud, the Grinsel dragon, is totally losing. Gasping for air and totally wiped out, the guy actually pulled it off and saved them both from certain death, while the girl finally realized what was happening and started freaking out. Dragon Shroud is flying high and losing her mind because she can't believe a human actually blocked her death breath. But Keaton is only worried about his wife, who's honestly just hyped that he didn't just bounce that deadly blast back, he straight up deleted every single flame. The kid is just super glad his little plants are still okay. Then Kedin locks eyes with the dragon. Like a super polite guy from another world, he bowed and apologized for sneaking into the dungeon, but he had one tiny catch. He points his sword right at the dragon and says if this is really his fight, he's ready to take down the ruler to protect everything he cares about. He points his holy sword right at the dragon and dares it to a fight to the death, even though he's secretly praying the monster just turns around and leaves. Shroud spotted the Grinsel dragon in the brave kid's hand and whipped around to face him. The dragon was itching to say something about the sword he was holding, and the guy had no better plan than to just speak his mind. Keaton held up his blade and revealed it was the exact holy sword Grinsel dragon Shroud was looking for, a gift from the immortal king himself to show everyone he's on a whole different level. The dragon slams onto the ground and tells him he's dead wrong, leaving the guy completely frozen in shock. Turns out this holy sword actually belongs to Grinsel dragon Vale. The monster reached out to grab its treasure. The kid was shaking in his boots watching this. Then the undead king spoke up, calling out, just like the dragon Grinsel, the guy was totally caught off guard when the master suddenly jumped in to shield Kitten. He let out a massive attack that sent everyone flying back, and Sensei just shoved the other lord right out of the way. As the winged monster lay dead on the ground, the master turned around and took all the blame, saying he was super sorry, which totally confused the kid until Plato jumped in to explain the whole mess. The immortal king said he was hunting for mountain intruders and hit up the dragon first, who totally lost it and called him a walking corpse for trespassing, right before the sensei mentioned Kidan's new neighbor. The dragon growled about his annoying neighbor, and took off to find the jerk messing with his turf, while the undead king realized he totally messed up and laughed nervously as he explained. He feels super guilty because they totally broke into Dragon Mountain without asking, and since he thinks it's all their fault, Sensei just stays quiet because he's human too and totally gets it. Dungeons are way more than just monster dens. They're the ultimate spot to grab food, building supplies, and all the steady cash people need to survive. The dead king reveals that this is the real reason people team up to raid dungeons. The immortal king tells Grinsel Vale that invaders are just a normal part of the job for a dungeon master, and the dragon can only gulp. He's actually calling out his OP winged neighbor, saying it's totally pathetic to get so triggered over a tiny part of the dungeon and leave his home just to hunt down the invaders. Grinsel Vale is sweating buckets while getting chewed out, acting like a total brat for someone so powerful, yet he still has the nerve to think he's the rightful heir to the geyser dragon. Sensei stares the dragon down and tells Kaiden he's not even in the same league, ordering him to get back to his mountain while the boy watching from behind just freezes up. Grinsel shuts down the immortal king's demands. He can't wrap his head around why some loser has the sword. His dad told him to snatch the blade from a dead guy. The undead king explains that the sword has its own will and chose Kidan itself, making Kidan feel totally hyped by the compliment. Back when the dragon's dad was still around, he finally realized how insane the immortal's power really was. He was actually terrified of her, unlike Grinsel Vale who just wants to burn everything to the ground, so giving up this sword was the only way to pay the price. The dragon is absolutely fuming and isn't buying that excuse, so he's ready to fight this human to the death just to get his hands on the geyser dragon's treasure. The creepy ghost king challenged the monster to a fight, and the massive beast just hissed right back at him. He spins around and gets ready to fly off, deciding to sit this fight out for once, yelling at the kid to never forget this moment, while Kidden, with no better plan, the kid desperately grabbed the beast's tail and slammed it into the dirt, and even he was shocked it actually worked. Grinsel totally loses it and starts screaming at the kid, calling him trash for even touching him. The terrified boy scrambles away, apologizing as fast as he can. Sensei speaks up. Kid turns to the dragon and asks him to stay for dinner if he's not in a rush, but Shroud is just standing there totally confused by the offer. He shows off a plate of Dungeon Dragon boar steak, and even though Kuden is totally nervous the beast won't like it, he still offers it a taste. Grinsel stared at the tiny scrap of meat for a second before tossing it right into her massive mouth. The dragon's taste buds were going wild, so he stood up and roared about how good it was, letting off a massive explosion that sent a shockwave through the entire area. The dragon blasted the kid back with a massive gust of wind just to say the food was fire, and Kiden was stoked that the dungeon lord actually loved his steak. Grinsel demands even more meat, making a jealous Platy beg for a steak of her own, and the boy is just hyped to keep cooking even though he's totally lost track of how much food everyone needs. A blinding light suddenly flared up behind the kids, and when they spun around, they saw Grinsel glowing just like a light bulb, leaving Kiden and Platy totally shocked. The group stares in total shock as the glowing dragon starts shrinking, its massive shadow getting smaller and smaller every single second. Meet Grinsel Dragon, a tiny girl named Shroud in a fluffy dress and twin tails who just made a super graceful entrance. The shocked newlyweds are staring in disbelief because that massive dragon just turned into a little girl, and Kidan is totally floored since he never even guessed the beast was a girl. But Sensei, Grinsel is literally drooling for more food as she screams that his steak was the best thing ever, and she'll love him forever. The girl jumps up and demands her meat right now, which totally ticks off Platy since the dragon girl is cutting the line. So Kiden starts frying up a ton of extra food to make. The undead king finally tried the food, and it was a total win. He was actually vibing with the steak. Our guy is so stoked that he liked it. Just like Sensei said, Keaton explains he just used some garlic, salt, and pepper for the taste. He thinks this is the most basic meal ever. The immortal king is totally shocked and doesn't believe. Grinesel the dragon is totally wiped out on the floor after eating way too many steaks, telling Keaton not to get cocky while a mermaid with a massive food baby is just vibing nearby. The girl gets super serious and tells him to chill out, making it clear she's still coming for that holy sword. Sensei reminds her she's way too green for this right now. She gave up and decided to just roast this guy into a pile of ash with her death breath so she could finally grab that sword for herself. Platy sits down and reminds her that if she goes through with this, she'll never taste those legendary steaks again. And Grinsel finally realizes her plan has a massive problem. A massive whirlwind swallows her up as she transforms into a dragon, yelling at Kidan that she'll take his sword one day. But until then, she's just coming back for his cooking. The kid agreed and said he's down to help whenever. But just as Shroud the Grinsel dragon started taking off, Platy told her to hold on because she had one last question. She starts wondering if there are any monster birds in her dungeon, totally just trying to look out for her husband. But Grinsel tells her that even though she doesn't know how many there are, the mermaid doesn't even want their meat because she's only hunting for eggs. But Shroud is totally lost on why they need bird eggs from a dragon anyway. Plenty gets super hyped and says that if they can just get some eggs, Keaton will make the meat taste even better, which hits Grinsel like a total bolt of light. She whipped around and flew straight home while the mermaid begged that winged beast to stop blasting those massive gusts of wind. Platy's ears perk up as she brags about being a monster expert and begs to come along, leaving Kidan totally shocked that his wife actually wants to fly with the ruler. Shroud didn't even hesitate to say yes to the Grinsel dragon, and a second later, she was soaring into the sky with Platy on her back, leaving the boy and the dead king far behind on the ground. Kidan stood there in total shock, just watching the girls fly away while Platy screamed that she wasn't going home empty-handed. The dead king calls the whole scene a pretty picture, and the boy doesn't even hesitate to agree. He looks up at the massive sky with a grin, saying this is way better than just sitting around being bored. Kidan shows his wife what he made, and she's so shocked she can barely speak, but then the boy confirms the nightmare. He actually turned a human being into that blade. Platy's eyes glow as he stares at the blade, claiming this mana metal sword will be the strongest weapon in the world, second only to the holy sword. She's already counting her cash because she's sure he's gonna sell it. This thing is worth a crazy amount of money, but her dreams of being rich are totally crushed. He totally buffed Kakashi into a moving scarecrow for the field, and the kid is super hyped with how it turned out. The girl didn't really get why it had to be Kakashi, and the mermaid looked super confused, but Kidan told her to chill since they still had some mana metal left. She suddenly started grinning, hyped that this sword-wielding scarecrow was gonna shred those annoying birds, but the guy had absolutely no clue what she was talking about. The kid stared at what the living dummy did as Kakashi pulled off a mana sword slash, easily shredding that bird into pieces. Keaton yells at the scarecrow that killing is totally banned on his turf, which really bums out the mermaid since she knows that's impossible. And poor Kakashi-kun can't even reach the birds that are screaming and mocking him from way up high. The kid looked super relieved and happy, but Platy was just confused why her husband was giving swords to a scarecrow. The kid gets a dark, excited look and screams about how cool this is, his eyes totally sparkling with hype. As Keaton tries to pick out the perfect gear for Kakashi, the girl just says she totally doesn't get what guys find so cool. Keaton is just chilling by the ocean with a sword on his back and a fishing rod in his hand, totally loving it since it's been way too long since he last went fishing. He remembered how that big catch from his fishing trip was actually a mermaid he accidentally married, so he decided right then to just start his new life with Platy. This regular working dude just got summoned to a whole new world. He thought he was finally gonna chill, but he was totally wrong. His life got way more exciting after he married a literal mermaid. To escape all the noise, he headed out to go fishing, and it was honestly the perfect way for him to finally relax. Suddenly, a splash rings out and a boy with fish fins on his head pops up from the water, giving Keaton a massive jump scare. Someone asked if the kid was Platy's friend, and he was already acting like total besties with the mermaid man. The monster definitely wasn't a fan of this new guy. It crawled out of the deep, gross water with one goal: to kill him. Kidan heard the threat and didn't say a. Suddenly, a whole army of mermaids in battle gear rises from the water, and their commander screams for them to take out the guy on the shore and anyone else who tries to stop them. The mermaid warriors followed their leader's command, forming a massive wave and charging straight for the stun Kidan. They slowly closed in and aimed their tridents right at the kid, who was so stunned he just stood there with his mouth wide open. Snapping back to reality, Keaton grabbed his holy sword by the hilt just in time and took a massive swing. He just flicks his hand and a massive tornado starts spinning those warriors around while they're trying to attack him. Keaton stood there totally paralyzed by what he'd just done, while the broken warriors choked and gurgled in the ocean waves. This panicked Platy came charging toward the noise, totally freaked out because she was so far from her husband, and just as the boy tried to explain everything, he got cut off immediately. Suddenly, someone who looked like Platy's friend popped out of the water and called her name. He'd also been sucked into that massive tornado from the holy sword. She couldn't believe it. They're standing just a few feet apart in dead silence, and Kidan is totally confused because Platy never even told him she had a brother. Suddenly, the mermaid warriors swarmed the girl and started calling her a princess, leaving Kaden totally blown away by what was happening. The worried girl stared at the splashing mermaids and called out to see if Princess Highness was okay, while Platy finally decided it was time to introduce herself. The guy who tried to take out her husband is actually her big brother, Prince Arowana, the next heir to the throne. The kid was totally blown away to see both the princess and the prince standing right there, and his jaw literally hit the floor. Platy puffs out her chest and reminds him that she told him she was a princess. Then she turns to her big brother to introduce the guy. But the prince is totally lost and has no clue what. The princess suddenly shouts that Kidan is her husband, and while she's not scared of the drama, he's totally panicking and trying to shut her up. The whole mermaid army and even the prince were totally stunned, standing there with their jaws on the floor. Platy stands her ground and tells her brother she knows he's there to drag her home, but she's never going back to the mermaid kingdom, so he can go ahead and tell their parents that. The prince is totally losing it because this land dweller kidnapped his sister, so he roars at his army to get back into the fight. Platy's big brother calls her husband a total jerk and plans to finish him off for good just to bring his sister home. The princess screams for him to stop holding back and just counterattack. But the boy with the holy sword is too scared to swing because he knows exactly who these people are. Suddenly, a massive blast of wind hits Platy and Kidan from behind, blowing the fish right back into the sea and totally ruining their second try. A massive blast of wind hit as the dragon veil soared toward the noise from the sea, and the prince was totally floored that the dungeon master himself had actually shown up. A whole army of mermaid warriors is absolutely terrified of this beast. They're shaking because they think the dragon is going to eat them alive. These mermaids are scared he'll just wipe them all out. Grinzel the dragon landed right next to the humans to see if they were all right. Kidan thanked him for the massive save, and the prince was totally blown away that regular people were actually friends with. The monster laughed and said he couldn't eat that tasty meat if the kid vanished, while Plenty told him not to get a big head just because he got a thank you. The girl's brother tried to say something to the three creatures, but the dragon realized he was standing there all by himself. The prince turns around to find the ocean totally empty. And since he didn't run from Grinzel, the daughter of the geyser dragon, she promises to reward him by turning him into coal on the spot. Keaton smashed the beast right in the knee to put it in its place, and the monster let out a massive howl of pain. The kid reveals that the guy in the water is actually Pletty's brother. Fail is totally shocked by the news. Keaton randomly invites the prince to grab some dinner. The boy reaches out his hand, offering to just chill, explain what's going on, and finally get to know each other. The prince wasn't buying the nice guy act at all because he was sure it was a trap, so he refused to listen to a single word. Plotty jumped into the middle of it. The husband snaps at his wife, yelling that this is messed up and her brother only came all this way because he's actually worried about her. He's convinced he needs to hear every single word the prince has to say, and the girl is totally caught off guard by his reaction. The older brother heard this and totally changed his mind, while Caden was blinded by the insane light shining off the prince. Since he's a prince, he can't just back down with his honor on the line, so he takes the challenge. The kid is totally stunned because his brother just walked out. Kidding yells at him to cover up, and while the brother thinks he's being a total jerk, the girl already saw this coming and hands him some fresh underwear. He realized his wife had already gone through the exact same thing, so he hit up his brother to come join them. Vale's freaking out and tells Platty that Keaton is about to feed him a new recipe, but she just stays quiet, totally suspicious of what's actually happening. The big brother takes one look at their new house and calls it total trash, since he can't believe Caden is letting a mermaid princess live in such a rundown shack. The prince is literally standing there in his underwear, screaming at the kid for treating his sister like a slave, until Plotty points out another building nearby. This is the barn where they stash all the meat from the mountains and veggies from the fields. The older brother is totally blown away by how huge it is and those super weird walls. Kid. She points over to a brewery where all the fermenting happens, and Kidan gets all starry-eyed thinking about the miso and soy sauce they're making, while his big brother just stands there totally confused by all the weird words he's using. Platty notices her husband has skills they've never even seen, since he's a pro chef and a total beast in a fight. Honestly, Kidan can do it all. That warehouse she showed us earlier is actually her secret magic room. Her husband Keaton is a total legend and always takes the best care of her, while Plotty is busy flexing about her. He just whipped up a fresh meal and finished building a cool garden table, but when he invites everyone over for tea, he's shocked to find a girl is already sitting there. The big brother is totally lost on where this kid came from, but Kitten explains it's actually Grinzel Vale in her human form, and now she's already rushing him to bring out the next dish. The princess is totally shocked to see a dragon sitting right in front of her, but Platty gets annoyed and says she always acts this way when she's hungry. Keaton's whipping up a brand new dish called zenzai, and while he was growing soybeans for the recipe, some Edzuki beans actually sprouted up too. Everyone grabbed their utensils and started digging in, but the brother was being super careful since he'd never seen food like this before. Everyone dug into the dessert soup at the same time and loved it, but while the siblings were enjoying the flavor, Vale asked for seconds only to find out the pot was already empty. These beans basically popped up by total accident, but there was only a tiny batch of them, and now everyone's losing their minds because the snacks are all gone. The girls turned on the prince, calling him out for his terrible timing and blaming him for the fact that all the soup was gone. The big brother drops to his knees and starts apologizing to the kid. He's blown away because Kidan's skills are on a whole different level, like he's some kind of... He told her he was trusting her with his sister, and while Plotty was totally hyped, Kidan wasn't so sure about the whole thing. He's totally confused why he's so against it, but since she's actually a mermaid princess, she isn't even allowed to pick her own husband. He thought everyone expected the world from her, but she screamed that he was totally wrong. She told him she only cared about being his wife and didn't give a damn about anyone else. The brother tries to chill his sister out, telling her that Mr. Saint is totally clueless about what's actually going on with his wife. The prince wanted to come clean, but Vale warned him that humans and demons are fighting for control of the surface, and now the neutral mermaids are being dragged into the mess with a forced... The brother is totally stunned that she actually knows the truth. She reminds him exactly who he's dealing with. For hundreds of years, every single secret has reached her ears. And honestly, humans and magical monsters are locked in a massive war, and Kidan just got summoned as the hero to take them all down. Big Bro warns that both sides are going to start messing with things way more, so the leaders have no choice but to pick a side. If the mermaids don't pick a side, they're basically asking to be attacked by everyone. The kingdom's big bosses are already debating which race Plotty should marry into. For Ked, her brother is convinced that Plotty has to run away to save the kingdom, so he's stepping up as a big brother to make her wish come true. The prince tells her he's glad she finally found a great guy, and she's clearly super happy to hear him say that. The brother drops to his knees, begging to protect his sister and make their marriage official, and while Keaton tells him to stand up, he's actually totally down to make it happen. Vale totally crashed their conversation to ask about marriage, and the guy got super flustered while admitting he was actually down for it. Grinsel Dragon is getting married too, leaving Keaton totally stunned while Platy glares at her rival with pure jealousy. Vale was plotting how to get her hands on the holy sword, and she realized that if they get hitched, she gets to walk away with half his stuff. To a dragon, a human life is over in a blink, and if she marries him, she gets to eat the best food ever every single day. She straight up asked him to marry her, but Keaton shut her down, leaving her totally shocked since he already had so many girls anyway. Vale is totally clueless and thinks it's completely normal for a strong guy to have a bunch of girls, which is why she calls him her master. Kidone tells her he's not her master, and that he's strictly a one-woman man, making Dragon Shroud totally lose it and start crying. She's totally confused and thinks it's either because she's not as strong as the immortal king, or the guy just straight up hates her. Still crying her eyes out, she demanded he marry her, and Keaton finally agreed just to get her to stop. Vale's cheering her head off while Platy stands there totally stunned, and as the guy says sorry to his brother, the prince points out that every girl dad in the world is basically the same. But on the outside, these girls are being super annoying, and Platy is totally losing it over how her brother and the new guy are acting. The new couple is just vibing on the beach. The brother rushes home to break the news to their parents. Now, they're just waiting for the big yes to make their marriage. She's super worried about Keaton and can tell something is totally off. She actually ditched her royal life because it was way too much, and that's when she first ran into him. She's having a blast eating her guy's amazing food and wants to stay with him forever. But she feels like she's just a burden, even though she can't even go back. Keaton just flashed a smile, knowing her story and deciding he's perfectly happy keeping things exactly the way they are. This kid actually got his powers straight from God. But since everyone thought he was trash in a fight, he ended up here. He doesn't even think he's some kind of... Ever since that day, he's been super shy asking her to stay by his side, and Platy just stares back at him with total fire in her eyes. She's so hyped that she dives straight into her future husband's arms, and now they're finally living their best life together. Vale totally ruined the boy's hug by complaining that they were making her wait, all while she kept calling him master. She's throwing a massive fit on the ground right at their feet, screaming that she's starving, so Kidan and Platy trade a look, and the boy decides he's giving her a wedding gift. And while the mermaid is super stoked, the girl says she's down for whatever as long as he does it fast. Keaton decides it's time to build a house, but he knows he's gonna need some extra hands. Platy tries to help by handing him a starfish, thinking that's what Keaton said they had to hit the fields right now to get the harvest sorted. Plus he was already super busy making miso and soy sauce and taking care of his wife. Keaton announced he was building a house, making Platy super happy, but the undead king getting hyped totally freaked out the heroes who didn't see him coming at all. The kid asked if something went down, but the king told him everything was cool and he just had some free time to drop by. Keaton finally breathed a sigh of relief, but then the guest said he had one more gift of mana metal and handed him a piece. The kid was totally blown away by how massive it was and said it was a huge help. So when the undead guy asked if he really needed that stone, the boy nodded and said he could. He said they showed up just in time because he was low on workers, but the king was totally confused about what he meant by hands. Keaton explained that Platy's brother realized their house was a total dump, so he decided to build a brand new one using every bit of strength he had. Plenty was totally blown away and suggested they just ask the undead king for help. And while Kidda thought the king making miso would be way faster, he immediately realized how dumb that idea actually. The undead king asked exactly how many workers he needed, and if he could just bring them all right there. Kadam was totally stunned and asked again thinking he misheard. But the undead king just fired back by asking if 10 would even be enough for him. The guy was super confused but said he'd be grateful, even though he had no clue where he'd get that much, and then the undead king just vanished after telling him to wait a bit. A little while later, Keaton and Platy were totally stunned when the undead king appeared and introduced 5 orcs and 5 goblins he brought straight from his dungeon. He told him these monsters were actually born in his dungeon, and they follow his every command. So, he told them to start listening to the saint, so the guy could use them however he wanted. Keaton shyly introduces himself to the monsters, but they just stand there like statues, and while Keaton's wondering why they're ghosting him, the undead king explains that they literally can. He explained they're basically mindless drones that only follow orders and don't even care about staying alive, and Keaton totally got the picture. The king said he didn't even have to pay them, and since they just eat magic from the air, he wouldn't have to buy them food either, which made Platy super excited. She hyped him up, yelling that Keaton would fix all his drama, but since he stayed quiet, Platy asked if that was actually true. The guy agreed she was totally right, so he gave the king a deep bow and thanked him with everything he had. The undead dude said it was totally fine, wished him luck on the house, and vanished into thin air as our guy clenched his fist. He shouted his big plan to team up and build an epic house, but the monsters just stood there like statues, making him feel like he was talking to a brick wall. Keaton stepped up and started barking orders, getting the orcs to haul logs and the goblins to saw wood while he showed them all how to master the machines. Once the foundation was finally set, Plutty was hyped about how awesome the monsters were, and even Keaton had to admit he was shocked by how massive the house was getting. He said orcs are perfect for heavy lifting since they're so strong, and goblins are actually super good at working with their hands. The guy explains that goblins mess up the hard stuff at first, but if you're patient, they slowly get better and can even learn to cut and weave grass. He flashed a smile and said that even though they're monsters watching them work, he can't help but want to be kind to them. And Plenty just beamed at her husband's sweet words. She told him not to feel bad since they're just made of mana and aren't actually alive. But Kitten just rubbed his head and said that everyone still deserves a chance to live a good life. Platty explains that magical creatures use these to swarm humans with massive armies, not even caring if the monsters die since the dungeon can just pop out more whenever they want. Kanan was totally blown away, realizing that monsters were actually running the whole show, from the food they ate to the trash they threw out. He just sighed and gave up, realizing this was the harsh reality of their world. But then he heard the goblin trip and crash down with all his gear, making Keaton whip around to see what happened. He rushed over to check on him, pulling the goblin to his feet and asking over and over if he was hurt. The goblin didn't say a word, and even though Keaton knew they wouldn't react, he started wondering if he even wanted to talk to them at all. Just then, the goblin spoke up and snapped the kid back to reality. He insisted he was totally fine, even telling Kadan the same thing, which left the boy and Platty absolutely speechless. He dropped down to one knee to check on him again, and the goblin finally told him he was doing okay. He called Kitten his lord and said he wanted to work even more, and the goblin right next to him jumped in to say he did too. Keaton's jaw dropped when the second one started talking too, but then a massive crowd of goblins and orcs swarmed in from every direction, all begging to join their crew. Plotty couldn't believe her ears, but she claimed the monsters were actually thinking for themselves now, making the boy scream that there's no way they could just wake up like that. He looked at his hands and realized this insane power was the real deal, so he knew he had to be super careful with how he used it. He balled up his fist and decided to give it everything he had, charging straight at the goblins to give them a massive hug and a huge thank you. Everyone figured they couldn't say no anymore, while the goblins were so hyped they started tossing the hero into the air. After a while, the massive house was finally finished, and while everyone was hyped, Grinzel was totally blown away. She asked what went down while she was away, but Platy just called her a dumb dragon and told everyone to get ready to laugh before bragging with a huge smirk that this place was actually her and her husband's private love nest. Rinsel rushed inside to explore, and even though Platy tried to stop her, the dragon girl was totally blown away because she'd never seen a building this cool before. Keaton told Vale to kick off her shoes and put them in a special spot, explaining to the confused girl that it was the only way to keep the tatami mats from getting ruined. She thought about it for a second, kicked off her shoes, and started rolling all over the tatami mat asking why it felt so good, while Plotty just wanted to know if she was... The guy says it's totally fine since that's exactly why he built such a massive house, but Plotty gets suspicious and asks if monster people are gonna live there too, and... They called him crazy and said there was no way they had something that epic, but then they revealed their home was actually inside a dungeon, and Keaton knew right then that the undead king was in. He told them they were building a massive house with tons of rooms called an apartment, and before the goblins could even complain, he mentioned adding kitchens and bathrooms too, so he'd definitely need their help. He turned to the monsters and asked for backup, and the goblins were so hyped to be needed that they all shouted yes together. Platty was totally confused by this invasion since she thought her and Kidan were going to have their love nest all to themselves. Suddenly, a goblin named Gobukichi runs over, and when Platty asks about the weird name, Kidan explains that this guy is actually the best at sewing in the whole group. Gobukichi says the boy's order is finally ready, and Kidan gets so hyped that he runs into the room and yells that it's actually a real futon. Platty was totally clueless about what a futon was, so Kidan explained it was actually a gift for his wife. He even grew cotton right next to the grass so he could make some tatami mats. He was dying to have a real futon in their brand new home. Then he told her she chilled there for a second before screaming that it felt amazing, and he was just hyped that she actually liked it. Keaton sat down next to her and apologized that she was still stuck sleeping on the hard floor, but Platty gave him a super heartfelt thank you for caring. She turned to Gobukichi and thanked him too, which totally caught the goblin off guard and made him super embarrassed. The heroes shouted that they were going to grind way harder from now on to make their farm life the absolute best. Right then, a massive ship came charging toward the shore, the wind whistling as it sliced right through the waves. A bored goblin was just filling his bucket at the shore when he suddenly spotted a massive ship on the horizon that looked like nothing he'd ever seen before. Back at the house, Caden hands Platy's brother a glass of water and asks him if something went down. The guy's jaw hit the floor as he looked around, calling the house straight up legendary and saying Kid must have some god-tier powers, making Kid just laugh awkwardly and agree. One line out. Input 1. They sat opposite each other, and Keaton said what today meant. 2. Arowana agreed and explained that it was about. The kid asked what they said, so Arowana explained that his dad was confused at first, but after hearing about his crazy strength, he finally agreed, especially since Arowana revealed. Keaton was happy for them, but mentioned Platy was super stressed about the political marriage, and when he asked how the people and monsters were doing, Arowana told him they were totally livid, which was exactly what Kidan expected. Platy told him their dad decided his daughter has to marry a legendary saint, but he wasn't even shocked and just asked if they'd already given up. He said they were totally ticked off about losing their chance to marry Platy, but since enemies were already hunting her down, they figured it was best to just stay out of it. Keaton was just glad the drama was over for now, but suddenly, Arowana dropped to his knees and slammed his forehead against the floor. Kaiden's totally caught off guard and asks what's going on, so Arowana promises they'll do whatever it takes to keep the kids safe, and in exchange, Caden asks them to look after Platy. Kaiden calmly told the guy to stop and get on his feet, adding that he was actually super happy and thankful to have Platy by his side. He told me he showed up all by himself, and if it wasn't for Platy, he'd still be totally alone. Maybe even forgetting his own name just like the king of the undead did. Erwano's jaw dropped when he heard the undead king's name, but Kaiden quickly explained he was just talking about his neighbor, an immortal ruler who goes by the same title. He dropped some major bad news. The enemy was launching an attack right from the coast. A massive wave of magical monsters had already landed on the shore. The goblins reported that their own. Keaton asked if magical creatures had broken in, but Erwana shut him down, saying this place is a top-secret vault, and that news totally rocked Keaton's world. Suddenly, they spotted a ship far off, and Brother Platy was positive it was full of magical creatures, while Kidding asked the Orcan in front of him if Orkibo was actually. The orc moves out of the way, revealing a demon woman on her knees, and Orkabo thinks she might be Astros the Milky, but he's not totally sure. Keaton stares at the girl, but she snaps at him to quit daydreaming and introduces herself as Astros the Heartless, a literal demon lord and one of the 4 heavenly kings. The orcs told the boy they caught her trying to assassinate their leader. Kadan was totally shocked by the news. Then he noticed a massive pile of bones nearby and asked what was going. He mentioned there were 100 enemies, but they totally wiped them out, and Kitten was losing his mind that 10 people actually beat 100. He walks up to the monsters and tells them he knows they're tough, but he begs them to stop being reckless because he'd be crushed if they died. But when they say, Astras was totally fuming because everyone was just ignoring her. Arowana walked up and asked her how she even knew about this place. The demon lord was completely shocked to see the mermaid. She told him they'd gotten soft and stupid from their easy lives, warning him to never underestimate how smart these demons really are. Then, she sliced through her ropes with her bare nails, mocking them for being too clueless to ever understand her as she broke free. Astre stands tall and draws her sword, declaring she's taking Princess Platy and killing the thief known as the Great Saint. She points her blade right at Keaton to show he's. Arowana says this guy is a top-tier demon lord who's obsessed with blood, and he's such a beast on the battlefield that even his own allies are shaking in their boots. The guy charges in to help, but Keaton and the undead king both tell him to back off, and while Keaton is actually happy, Arowana is totally on edge as the undead king asks why everyone is being so loud. The guy spun around and totally freaked out when he saw the king, while Kedan just smirked and introduced them to each other. Astras and Arowana totally lost it, screaming that this guy was the world's biggest nightmare and they couldn't believe the kid actually knew him. The zombie king said he heard the demon was coming to kill Keaton, and after the boy confirmed it, Astras was totally on edge until a strange noise from the sky made her look up. She spotted a massive dragon in the sky asking what was happening. Keaton walked up to greet Grizel while Astras stood there totally freaked out, and Platy hopped off the dragon to sprint. She checked if he was doing okay and he said yeah. Then Arowana asked where Grizel had been, so she explained they were just up in the mountains hunting for tonkatsu eggs. Astrays hit the ground as the dragon explained they'd spotted a demon ship at sea and just had to come back to check it out, then asked if this low-level demon was actually trying. She made it clear that if anyone messed with her master, they'd be her next target. She basically called demons total trash and said she was going to delete their whole race. Keaton managed to hold. He laid out a deal. If she promised to stop being their enemy, she could finally go home, and the whole squad stood right behind their hero. Estra cuts him off and tells him to watch his mouth since she's one of the 4 heavenly kings. But she's actually shaking with pure terror and trying to keep it together so she doesn't embarrass the demon lord. She stood up with a clenched fist and shouted that she had a better idea, pointing her sword right at Kidan and challenging him to a duel where she'd only listen to him if he... Grinzel was totally fuming at the demon's trash talk and was ready to fry her right then and there. But Kidan stepped in and declared that absolutely nobody was going to stop him from living his life in this world, which made Plotty blush like crazy. The kid pointed his sword at the demon lord and accepted the challenge, while the woman thought he was being totally reckless and jumped into her own battle stance. She stared him down, thinking that even with his powerful crew, he was still just a normal guy she could easily snatch up. When she got a closer look, she realized it was the legendary dark sword, Dr. Schwartz, and she was so shocked she dropped it and passed out cold. Everyone was totally shocked, and Kidan asked why she just passed out, but then Grinzel suggested burying her to use as fertilizer for the fields until Kidan stepped in and stopped the dragon. A little later, Grinzel is flying way up in the sky, clutching a terrified, shaking Astra in her paw. Keaton told her to head back home, which she totally hated, and the sailors were so freaked out by Vale that they ditched Astris and ran for it. The girl finally snapped out of it and asked the dragon why she was even taking orders from that guy. Grinzel just let out a huge, annoyed sigh and gave her a super creepy look, saying she didn't owe her any answers at all. She smirked, thinking his cooking was way too good for anyone else to know about, while Astros kept flying in her paw, wondering who this guy was to take down 2 disasters like that. A little while later, Keaton, Platty, and Grizel are just standing there, totally stunned by what's happening. Astras the Heartless was standing right there with 2 demons, and when the boy asked what was up, the goblin told him they just wanted to talk. Platty charged at Astras, screaming for her to get lost, while Kadan tried to get her to chill and explain what was going on. The 2 demon girls next to her politely asked for a chance to explain that they'd actually been kicked out of the Demon King's army. The heroes were totally stunned and called her a liar, saying she was the only one kicked out of the army, so she just told the demons to back off. They were totally shocked she'd say that after they promised to serve her forever, and Grinzel, who was in his human form, was definitely not happy about what he was seeing. She went full dragon mode and told everyone to shut up or get toasted, but Keaton stopped her cold by threatening to skip her dinner. The dragon whipped back around, and the freaked-out demons scrambled behind Astras while the kid asked why he was even kicked out of the Demon King's army. She hung her head and admitted she totally failed to grab the princess. Her monster squad got wiped out, and that wasn't even the worst part. She warned that letting a dragon run wild on the battlefield was a massive crime. So Keaton asked what kind of dragon was even out there between the humans and demons. He looks over at Vale, who just chills with her hands behind her head and says she was told to bring her back, making Astris realize that's why she lost her Sky King title and got kicked out of the country. The demon girl next to her whispered that this meeting felt super sketchy, since they rushed the decision while the demon lord was away just to get rid of her. Another girl jumps in and blames Mr. Reverion, saying he's always up to no good and this is definitely his fault. Astris cut them off and told them to stop pointing fingers, because in the demon army, power is the only thing that matters, and she only failed the mission because she wasn't strong enough. Keaton finally figured out she was kicked out because of all the chaos, and even the demons were crying since Astris went all in on the army. Vale snapped and asked what she wanted, so Plathy nervously brought up taking responsibility, but Astris shut her down, saying she's starting a new life and needs some answers. She explained that the local orcs and goblins were way stronger than her and could actually talk, which is totally impossible. Plus, Kidan was being worshipped by 2 massive world-ending threats. She balled up her fist and demanded answers, then dropped to her knees and begged the guy to let her work for him. Vale and Platty were totally stunned, but the guy just coolly said yes, making the girls blow up and say no way, while he shyly admitted he wasn't even sure if working there would actually help her. He offered to help since she was ditching her past for a fresh start, but Vale just let out a creepy laugh and warned him that they'd be coming back to kill him later anyway. Kitten gave her a confident smirk and said he was totally down for the challenge, while the girl realized this was a win for everyone. The demons with Astros asked to stay too, and Kitten was totally down for it, but he gave them one major rule: absolutely no spilling blood while they were there. Vale was super annoyed at how clueless the owner was, sighing that this felt just like Kidan, while Astros bowed and promised to do whatever job was needed as long as she stayed. She finally asked for his order, so a hyped-up Keaton said he definitely had a request while the demon girls nearby introduced themselves as Batemi and Balena. A bit later, the demons are out in the fields with hoses, totally clueless about why they're stuck doing farm work. Kidding wasn't sure they were ready and almost gave them chores instead, But Astros shut him down, insisting that if she can handle a weapon, she can definitely handle this. She noticed Astros was just digging in the same spot over and over. Tammy had to step in and explain that the tool was a hoe, used for softening the dirt and making garden beds. Astros and Belina are fancy nobles with perfectly smooth skin, so she demanded they hand over every single thing they had. Astra swore she'd serve the great saint no matter what, and Keaton was just hyped to see these demons working so hard. He sends Batami and the goblins off to prep the garden beds, then tells Astros and Beline to plant seeds every 30 centimeters, and everyone's totally down for the plan. A little while later, they got right back to it, with Astros and Belina sitting down to bury the plants while Batemi loosened up the dirt. Esther winced as a sharp pain shot through her lower back, making it impossible for her to even stand up straight. Belina didn't think the job would be this tough and let out a massive scream, so when Astros asked what was up, she told him something was literally wriggling around in the dirt. Astros' back suddenly snapped with a loud crack. Everyone was screaming their lungs out from the pure agony and the gross sight of the floor. Kaiden watched the whole thing and knew right. A bit later, Astros strolled right up to the orcs and goblins and laughed, saying that since the hunt was moving further away, she could finally show her true self. She asked Platy what they were tracking, and she decided on a square boar since Keaton really needed to stock up on meat. Astros begged for this job because she really wanted to make up for her work out in the field. Suddenly, they heard footsteps and looked straight ahead. The noise was coming from the deepest part of the woods. Everyone completely froze, just waiting to see what would happen next. A whole pack of square boars suddenly charges right at them, and Astros screams for Belena and Batami to get their guard up. Suddenly, something zoomed right past Astros' head. It was a pack of orcs and goblins. They were taking down the boars with lightning-fast swings of their axes. In a flash, the whole flock was taken down, and those monster guys didn't even make a sound because they were totally used to this happening. Astros was blown away by their crazy strength, but Belina just pointed at their gear and showed him that every axe and sickle was actually made of mana metal. Platy sighed at how extra it was that every single tool and weapon was made of pure mana metal, leaving the demons totally shocked since stuff that high quality is basically impossible to find. But Temi finally figures out why they're so strong, but Astros tells her she's totally wrong. She tells them these guys were already beasts when they first met, even without any weapons, and Belena and Batemi are totally losing it. Platy mentioned her hoe was also made of mana metal, but Astros just shuddered, realizing the real issue wasn't the weapon. It was that they had no idea how to use it. She screamed that they couldn't just stand around anymore and that they were joining the hunt too. Once the boars were finally taken down, Platy thanked everyone, but even though Astros was covered in bruises and gasping for air, he claimed they were just getting started while the orcs... She didn't expect these mountain boars to be such a struggle, but Platy just licked her lips, rolled up her sleeves, and said it was time to start butchering. She walks right up to the bodies and starts hacking them apart, saying there's no way they can carry them like this unless she chops them up and freezes the pieces. Back at home, Caden's in the kitchen whipping up a pot of soup and giving it a quick taste test. Platy shouted that they were finally back, and the guy spun around with a huge grin, saying they showed up at the perfect moment. He popped out of the kitchen to say dinner was ready, but when he saw those creepy dark demons, he asked what went down, and Platy told him their whole day had been a total disaster. Looking down in shame, Astros admitted she used to be one of the legendary heavenly kings everyone was terrified of, but she ended up here after losing her title to these locals who are insanely strong and have weapons on a whole different level. She felt totally defeated, but Kidden shut that down fast, telling her that her real power wasn't about her own strength, but the loyal friends like Batami and Belina who were standing right there with her. Eni tells her she's actually got a power called charisma, and if she just starts believing in herself, she's gonna unlock a whole new future. The girls were totally hyped as they looked at each other, grinning and clenching their fists. Keaton finally announces it's time to eat, and since the weather is awesome, a super hyped Vale helps him set up their delicious feast on the table outside. Estrez and Vale were totally clueless since they'd never seen food like this, but Keaton told them it was actually grilled boar mite with ginger and tangeroo soup. The girls weren't buying his story at all as they nervously took their plates, but the second Astris took a bite, she started bawling because it was so good, which totally freaked Keaton out. Platy and Vale were having the time of their lives scarfing down the food, and seeing them so hyped made Kaiden tell them to eat as much as they wanted and get ready to do it all again tomorrow. A bit later, Astris shows up with a basket of food and notices Keaton and Platy are totally gone, but Belena just says they're out at sea taking care of business. Astros finished picking the veggies and asked what was next, so Belina told her to get started on weeding and cleaning the house. Vale barked at Astros to get to work in the fields while she kicked back on the porch, telling him straight up that if he didn't plow, he'd starve. Tammy asked what was going to happen to her, but Vale totally lost it and barked at the low-ranked demon to stop muttering. She let out a heavy sigh and told them she'd be the one staying behind to watch the house. Tammy and Belena were totally crushed, but they didn't try to argue. Down at the shore, Platy hops into the water as her legs turn back into a tail, telling Kadan right next to her that she just has to switch back to this form every now and then. He asks if it's actually easier for her to live in the ocean than on land, and she just stares him down. She confidently told him it didn't matter where they were because her human transformation was literally top tier. Living on land is just way easier for her, and even though Kido knew she was lying, he loved how she tried to be nice about it. But when he asked what was really up, she explained that monsters crawl out of dungeons and caves hidden in the mountains and the ocean, which made Kitten ask if things like fish fertilizer, herring, and starfish were monsters too. Platy nodded and explained that some were helpful while others were just trash. But then she mentioned another one of the ocean's top 5 monsters was out there, making Kitten's face go totally dark. Platy bragged that this enemy was going to be a total breeze. He wasn't about to let her go solo, but he had no clue how he'd breathe under the... She handed it to him and told him to start chewing so he could breathe, but Platy warned him not to swallow it yet, or he'd run out of air. Keaton gulped it down and said he got the point, but the girl just froze and asked why he actually swallowed it before handing him another one and telling him to swim after her. This guy dives underwater and tries to breathe, and he's actually doing it, which totally blows his mind. Suddenly, Platy pops up right in front of him, waving and telling him to follow her, and she looks totally gorgeous. Since she was always hanging out on land, Keaton totally forgot she was actually a mermaid. But as he swam after her, he felt so hyped that this stunning princess was his wife. Kitten turns bright red, making the girl freak out and ask if he's even breathing, but he just waves his hands around to show he's totally fine. Pleiada suddenly sensed something and whipped around, realizing the salt and minerals were actually oozing with pure evil. Keaton looked over to see what was up, and right then, a massive fish with glowing eyes appeared right in front of the squad. Platy yelled that it was her, the spotted moray eel, and the fish let out a massive roar as it charged right at them, totally freaking Kadan out. She yelled that she wasn't letting her budge and told him to finish the job, right before she started chucking her potion flasks. They slammed into a spotted moray eel, making it burst into flames and scream, while the guy stood there totally shocked that his wife was pulling off fire underwater. He whips out his sword and swings it with everything he's got. Right before their eyes, that spotted moray eel gets sliced clean in half. Platy was basically showing off that her husband is... Kaiden spotted them and started waving his hands, so Platy told everyone the trouble was over and they could finally head home. The dude grabbed everyone's attention, showed them he wasn't done yet, and then dove straight down to the bottom. He starts hacking away at the seaweed from the roots with his sword. Plenty is totally confused because this stuff is trash and can't even be used for magic. The real problem, though, is... She asked what he was planning to do with them, and with a creepy grin, they headed to shore where he started slicing them up, humming about how tasty they were gonna be. They've got a pot boiling right on the rocks, and Kitten says this seaweed is basically wakame, so he wants to cook it up with that moray eel. But Platy, Keenan's down to try it, so he grabs the plate and says it just needs a little salt and pepper before it's finally ready. Wakame and moray eel soup from a whole different world. Platy wasn't so sure about the food at first, but the second she took a bite, her face totally lit up because it tasted amazing. She was totally shocked that this trash ingredient tasted so crunchy and amazing. And Kitten was just hyped she liked it since even the most useless things can end up being a total win. He realized cleaning that gross slime would take way too much salt, so he was gonna just leave the eel and head home until Platy offered to help him out. She promised the flavor would blow everyone's minds, and her respect for her husband hit a whole new level as they finished the dish. The guy gets all flustered and asks again, but Platy tells him to stop doubting, while Kadan admits he didn't do it alone since so many people had his back. Platy was totally caught off guard. But the guy reminded her that since they started living there, all the new neighbors had made the place way too crowded. He's finally starting to get why having backup is so important, and while Platy was hyped by the speech, the guy told him he'd actually realized something else too. Basically, they needed to spend way more time together, and while she was totally shocked, Kitten reminded her that they're actually newlyweds now. Platy turned bright red, and when the hero asked her to come back for a private swim, she was totally down for it. She told him she had to cook up a way for him to breathe and talk underwater, and he just gave her a solid nod. Meanwhile at the demon castle, it was official. Astros the Heartless was kicked out of the Four Kings and banished, and right then, everyone started talking about the meeting to pick his replacement. The man jumps in and asks who gave them the right to banish Astros, but they just tell him she messed up big time. This gloomy-looking guy calls him Reverian the Poor, and tells him to quit acting like a victim since he's the one who caused this whole mess. The guy jumps up, draws his blade, and presses it right against Reverian's throat while screaming that he's been betrayed. Reverian started shaking like crazy and begged for his life, calling the guy with the sword the Demon Lord Zayden. Zidane told Reverian to clean up this total disaster before he gets back, or at least fix it enough to take the blame. Reverian bowed his head as another guy stepped up, handing him a note and saying these were the coordinates. Zidane said he understood, but his mind went straight to Kidan, knowing that even a demon lord will make a move when they're totally enraged. Let's look back at the other summoned heroes and meet Momoko Akasaka, a girl who seemed totally ordinary. Well, at least she did back then. She was busy taking on a whole swarm of monsters using a powerful Tier 2 Divine Scythe spell. With just one swing, the ground splits wide open toward the horde, and every single monster drops dead into the wreckage. Momoko got pulled into another world, unlocked the insane Divine Scythe level 2 skill, and now she's hunting down demons to save humanity. This girl was having a total nightmare adjusting to this world since there was zero tech, the food was trash, the bread was hard enough to kill someone, and her cheap clothes were super itchy. Tons of people died because they couldn't handle being summoned, and while there were 10 survivors when Momoko showed up, she's now wondering how many are even left. She figured he was finally out of the way, that guy who turned out to be a total weakling with zero skills. In this brutal world, you're basically dead meat if you don't have any powers. But Momoko Akasaka is on a whole different level. She's got such an insane skill. That's why she's out there soloing every monster in her path with one of the most broken skills in the world. This demon army is literally endless, and no matter where you look, there are monsters absolutely everywhere. She stares them down and knows this is the front line, and since she absolutely cannot lose, she's going to protect this world no matter what. Just then, a massive dragon soared right over the girl fighting the Demon King's army, making everyone below freeze in pure terror, while Momoko Akasaka screamed that it was a dragon before she could. He's a total curse on the world that you can't look away from, even though seeing him is a death sentence, and since even the bad guys think he's a monster. Even Momoko, a summoned hero with a broken one-hit kill skill, couldn't take this monster down, and everyone else started screaming to run before its breath wiped them all out in an instant. Everyone was freaking out, wondering if this dragon was about to end them all as it finally touched down on the ground. Then he actually started talking, demanding everyone listen while treating them like they were way beneath him, and the crowd was completely shocked because they had no clue dragons could even speak. She introduces herself as Grinzelvale, daughter of the legendary Dragon King Grazer, and says her master ordered her to bring back the total loser he just tossed out. Astras the Heartless collapsed right in front of everyone, and the demons recognized her instantly, yelling for the others to grab her fast. Vale revealed that Astras was actually supposed to die, but the master changed his mind, so everyone better listen up and not miss a single word. She makes it clear that she doesn't care if you're a human or a demon. If you insult her master, you're dead. She's literally going to burn Humans and demons were barely holding on, most of them crashing to the dirt from the sheer force of the magic, and Momoka couldn't believe how crazy strong this power actually was. Vale shouted that Saint Kadan is her master, and warned everyone to never forget that name, because anyone who messes with him is officially her enemy, before she just blasted off into the sky. Everyone sitting on the ground started whispering Saint Kidan's name, totally shocked that even a dragon was taking orders from him, even though nobody actually knew who he was. Back at home, Kidan and Platy have built a bunch of houses and massive farms, and right now Kidan is just chilling with his food and a drink, looking totally satisfied with. He stands up and stretches while looking at the mountains, ready for another day of farm work, when suddenly he hears someone coming and whips around. A guy suddenly asks if he's Saint Kidan, and when the shocked boy says yes and asks who he is, the man reveals he's actually the Demon Lord Zayden, leaving Kid. Temmie and Belena shouted over to Kidan, totally hyped that they finally pulled it off. They hauled the animal's body away on a stick, hyped that Mrs. Astras finally caught her prey after putting in some serious work. Her face totally shifted the moment Zayden said her name, and she looked up, completely shocked to see him there. The Demon Lord is totally shocked she's actually there, and when she asks how he tracked her down, he reveals her own crew left a secret code behind. Bottomie and Belena are loving the view, and when Astros asks why he even showed up, the Demon Lord says he's just there to see her, making the whole crew freak out with excitement while Caden stands there totally clueless about the vibe. Astra admitted she blew the mission, so she's officially out of the Four Kings, and he thinks she's totally useless now. She told him Zayden always looked out for her, but she didn't want people talking trash later, so the Demon Lord got super hyped and told her he didn't care about that because she was way too important to him. The woman was totally blushing. Platy's jaw hit the floor. and Vale was just getting super annoyed by all the drama. They finally headed inside. Kidan hooked everyone up with some hot tea, and Zidane apologized for being such a hassle just by being there. Then he reveals he's Zayden, the ultimate king of all demons. So Keaton asks if he's the big boss of the demon realm, and when he nods, Keaton asks if... He reveals that the demon lord's #1 job is actually keeping the kingdom safe from humans. This was a mission passed down by the previous lord. To make it happen, he's out. Keaton nods, but Plates points out that when you're always fighting, you usually have nobody to go home to. Zayden just smiles though, saying he's lucky to have Aster. She got super flustered and said she didn't deserve the hype, which her team absolutely loved seeing. Kidden swore he'd never kick Astris out. Zidane totally agreed. He explained that while Astris was busy leading the charge on the front lines, the military court secretly sentenced him. Seddon explained how Astris got blamed for that dragon showing up and trashing the battlefield. But while Vale just hummed a tune like he didn't care, Caden just listened, totally lost. The guy said Astros was gone by the time he finally got back, so Kidan realized he only came here to look for her. Zidane grabbed Astros' hand and told her he was so relieved she was back because he'd be totally lost without her, especially since he thought he'd lost her forever. Plotty told them their love was super obvious, making the girl blush and swear they were just childhood friends. She also told him they were doomed because a king has to look after the whole country, and this place just wasn't worth his time. Rinselvale was absolutely fuming the whole time and finally snapped, screaming at everyone to shut up. She yelled that she didn't care if he was the master or not. He could just take Astris and get lost. Zidane just asked who she even was. She told them that the dragon crashing the fight was Grinzel Vale, and she looked at those demons like they were total trash. Zayden stared at the girl in total shock, claiming this couldn't be happening, while a fuming Vale snapped that she was only there to return Astris and hated working so hard for some rude brat who showed up at her master's place. Kedian snapped at Vale because he was annoyed, so she agreed to shut up while Zayden just watched them looking totally lost. He told Kedadan that Astros was stuck with a super dangerous group that basically owned her life. But then the demon lord balled his fist and swore he'd get her back no matter what. He stood up with total confidence and demanded a fight right then and there. Kedan was completely caught off guard. The guy said his title meant everything to him, so he had to prove his fighting. The hero tried to argue, but Plady told him to get real, revealing her husband is the master of Vale, a straight-up world disaster, and that an undead king is lurking there too. Heard the rumors and told him he had no shot at winning, and after Astra confirmed it was true, he realized she belonged to nobody but herself and was free to go with Zidane. The hero says she only joined him to find her purpose and test her limits, but since there's someone back home who's super worried and wants her back, she should probably focus on him instead. He asked for her choice and reminded her that since Zidane was honest about his feelings, she should give it a shot too, making her blush while her crew cheered and Vale celebrated because she was finally free to go. Asterisk gripped his hand and swore she'd follow him anywhere, from the heat of battle all the way to the afterlife. Zayden agreed and told her to come back home and never leave him again, and she was totally hyped about it. Her squad was hyped that their boss finally got a title and wasn't a loser anymore. Vale was thrilled, and Kata and Shed actually started crying seeing her win. Platty suddenly jumped off the couch and yelled at them to knock it off, leaving everyone staring at her in total confusion. Kin asked what was up, and the girl told him straight to his face that for a big bad demon lord, he was actually super clueless. Woodlouse is actually super smart and starts acting like his future wife, so when Zayden asks who she is, Platty reveals she's the literal mermaid princess. She dropped a total bombshell. The demon nobles were forcing her to marry Zayden. The demon lord was completely stunned, jumping up to demand who came up with that since he'd never heard a... The guy plopped down next to Astris and swore there was nothing going on between him and Platty, while Kadad just nodded like he totally got it. He explained that whoever marries the mermaid princess gets all her kingdom's loot, and Platty just nodded along like he was totally on board. She repeated the demon noble's offer to team up and marry the mermaid princess to their king, which totally caught Astra's crew off guard. Plotty points out that the demon lord is totally clueless about his own marriage and his best soldier being kicked out, which means someone on the inside is definitely backstabbing him. Every demon there knew right away that this had to be Riverian. Plotty revealed that as soon as she married Keaton, Riverian sent Astris to come after her. Since the mission failed, Zidane realized that going back to Astris was a total waste of time until he took this guy out, because everyone would just keep reminding him of her failure. Everyone was saying he'd lose his followers or even get kicked off the throne, and while Keaton was totally shocked, he honestly didn't care at all. The hero actually apologized because the guy was being totally real, and he just couldn't stand the thought of some scumbag ruling the demon land. Zedian and Astras were totally floored by what the hero said. But then Platy jumped in and claimed she could fix everything at once by telling the Demon Lord and Astras to stop acting like a boss and servant and just get married. The girl straight up asks to get married right then and there, leaving the demons totally shocked and confused by the proposal. Timmy and Belena were losing their minds with excitement that the Demon Lord and Lady Astras were getting married, while Zidane was totally caught off guard and felt pretty unsure, leading Platy to ask him straight up if he was actually unhappy with the news. Astras turns bright red and totally shuts the idea down, but Platy tells her to chill out and stop overreacting, explaining that if she actually becomes queen, it'll completely wreck the plans. She explained that the quickest way for a demon to get close to power was to marry their daughter or sister to the Lord, and Kidding just nodded because he totally got it. Platy confirmed that if Zidane and Astras got married, the bad guys would be left with absolutely nothing. She told them the decision was already final. Astras was super embarrassed and finally tried. The lady gave her a total death stare, so the woman asked what she'd actually have to do if they got hitched, and the girl just smirked and said that was a really good question. She says you gotta make a promise to God to get married. So Zayden and Astros hold hands and think about their vows while the demon squad cheers, and Caden asks for the full scoop. Platy was super hyped to explain that if they took their vows before God, their marriage would be totally official, and no one could ever mess with it. He suddenly remembered that back in his old world, you had to fill out a bunch of paperwork at the district office just to get officially married. He still asked what he actually had to do for this oath, so Platy gave him props for the question and said they were about to find out. Suddenly, the undead king pops up and asks why he was summoned, leaving Zidane totally shook that an actual immortal king showed up. He confirmed the rumors were true. The saint really does have 2 world disasters in his pocket. But Vale was just fed up because he'd heard that same story a million times already. Zidane stared at the massive opening and realized the kid was actually a dragon. Astras backed him up, and Kadan immediately grilled Platy on why she summoned the undead king. 1 line out. If the input is 1 line, I output 1 line. Final version. She just grinned and told him he'd be watching their wedding, leaving Zidane and... Platy explains that since the undead king was once a high priest, God is basically watching them swap vows, which makes Keaton think back to how weddings worked in his own world. Platy hyped up and asked the undead king for his take, and he revealed that Zayden and Astras are actually demons, even though he used to serve humans before he died. The girl started shaking and dropped to her knees, crying that she'd made a huge mistake, while Keaton was totally lost and asked her what was going on. Everyone says that every race has their own god to follow. Like humans worship Zeus, mermaids have Poseidon, and demons serve Hades, meaning every single group has their own divine boss. Wait, the prompt says, rewrite the following line, singular. But the input has 4 sentences. I will provide 4 sentences in 1 single line. The immortal king spent over 1,000 years soaking up knowledge, and since he could pray no matter the religion, Platy was absolutely stoked to hear it. She turned to Zayden and Astras to see if they were cool with it, but the woman said absolutely not, even though she thanked her for checking. The undead king reached out his hand and said it was time to start, casting a spell for everything to grow, while Temi and Belena looked around terrified and Kadan and Vale stayed on high alert. The king kept chanting his spell, shouting that he was pulling them into his depths, and sharing the mother goddess's blessing to turn the whole place into a sanctuary that could be cleansed however they wanted. The noise gets crazy loud as the undead king screams and throws his hand up, summoning a massive magic seal in the sky that blasts everything with lightning. Estrez and Zidane looked around while Kadan asked what was happening, and Platy explained it was the undead king's prayer, making the air feel like it was totally crushing them. Suddenly, they spot something moving behind those massive gusts of wind, and all look in the same direction. Right in the middle of the magic seal, this massive guy appears in the sky holding a staff and rocking a crown and cloak. Astros knew right away this was the god of the underworld. Hades and Keaton totally lost it, screaming in pure shock. The undead king was totally caught off guard, but he just casually admitted he went too far and summoned a literal god, leaving Platy completely blown away that someone could actually pull that off. He was just trying to set up a holy spot for a ceremony, so he had no idea why a god suddenly showed up. But Platy screamed that it didn't matter and demanded to know their next move. Hades finally speaks up, complaining that nobody has called him in years and asking why he's even there, while Temi and Belena are absolutely terrified because they think Zeus's kids just started another war. Zayden dropped to 1 knee and told him he was dead wrong, explaining that even though the war was a total toss-up and the demons needed to stay sharp, Hades had absolutely nothing. Zayden says sorry and drops the bomb that he's actually a demon lord, which completely blows Kadan's mind since he thought he was talking to a god, but then the guy bows. They decided to get married and prayed for a blessing from the god of the underworld. But they accidentally summoned him right there in person, and the king of the undead actually apologized for the chaos. Xaden apologized for the interruption, and once Hades heard the immortal king was the one who summoned him, he realized it all made sense. He said okay, but Xaden had to follow one big rule for the blessing. No other wives allowed, so he asked the bowing lord if he'd swear to love only one woman for... Xaden said this was exactly what he wanted, and the demon lord swore right then that he'd only ever marry Astros and spend his entire life with her. Hades told him he liked his style, then reached out his hand and said he was giving him a blessing. Once the weather finally cleared and the underworld god vanished, Xaden stood back up and grabbed Astros's hand. Keaton figured Hades was actually a pretty chill guy, but Vale was totally over it because his shouting was wrecking her ears, so the king of the undead promised to be way more quiet with his prayers next time. Plady ran up to the demons totally hyped, telling them how lucky they were to get a blessing straight from God since that's the ultimate protection from heaven. The undead king wished for health and lots of healthy babies, promising that anyone who tried to split them up would get totally destroyed by the gods. Teamy and Belena were stoked they actually pulled it off, and Xaden told them that for a demon, this was the ultimate proof of his love for Astros, while Kaiden realized that making a vow, the demon lord turned to Kidan and Plady and told them he owed them big time, because they actually made his dream of marrying Astras come true, right when he was about to give up. Astras was crying happy tears and promised she'd never forget their help, while Kidan just played it cool and waved it off, even though he was secretly super hyped for her. Astras loved hearing that, and Xaden asked if they should head back home right now to tell everyone she was officially their new queen. She turned Xaden down and said she was staying put for a while, leaving both Xaden and Keaton completely stunned. Grinzelvale was totally fed up and told the lady to get lost, but she snapped back that since they were already hitched, they should just head back home, while Kidan shouted for her to stop. He straight up asked Astros why she really wanted to stay, while Xaden just stared at her looking completely clueless. She told them Cadence's training totally changed her, and looking straight at Xaden, she said she wanted to keep learning so she could finally be the perfect wife for him. The guy was totally stunned, but he figured she had her reasons, so he asked Kaden to keep an eye on Astra for a bit longer, while Temmie and Belena watched them with super worried faces. Keaton said he was totally cool with it, which completely shocked Vale since he just wanted them gone so he wouldn't have to share his food, and the hero even admitted he wasn't. Xaden then asks if he can crash with them for a bit, leaving Astras totally shocked and Kidan just plain confused. He wondered if it would cause any trouble, while Plotty and Vile were just as confused, and Keaton asked if the demons would mind, but the demon lord said it was fine as long. He said that since the dragon caused total chaos for both sides, the troops aren't moving an inch until they figure out what's happening. Kidden yells that he gets it while Vale is totally fuming about being blamed, so when Xaden asks if they can stay, Kidden tells them to make themselves at home while realizing they're gonna need to build their own house soon. She asked if they'd totally lost it, reminding them there's a traitor in the group, and they're just gonna leave him behind. Velement told them he could keep his evil plans moving if they just left, and Platti and Kadan actually stopped to think if they really wanted to get in his way. Xaden just smirked and told them not to sweat it because he'd already handled everything, letting out a wicked laugh that had Kadonic hyping him up as the ultimate demon lord. She pointed right at Xaden and called him the real weirdo, asking how he even got there without a ship while Platti and Kidden also waited for an answer. The guy explained that with teleportation magic and the right coordinates, you can zip anywhere in a heartbeat, and Kadan was totally hyped about how easy it made everything. Xaden then turned his eyes on Belena, making her tremble as he reminded her that she's actually one of those super rare spatial demons. She left a note with the coordinates before she headed out, so the demon lord could teleport straight to her. Temmie pulls Belena into a massive hug and tells her she's doing great, making her totally blush, but Belena admits she's actually terrified that some secret plot is going to force them to break up. The demon lord thanked Belena for the help, and Vale was so mad she swore she'd never forgive her. Platti jumped into the convo to warn them about other spatial magic, and when the girl got scared they'd show up, Xaden told her to just chill out. The coordinates for this place are totally locked behind a secret code, and without the key from the person who set it up, they're basically worthless. The demon lord adds that this place is totally invisible to everyone else, leaving Keaton and Whale completely stunned. Xaden explains that the demons are using space and clairvoyance magic to spy on places from miles away. The whole place is actually wrapped in a shield that shuts down magic, leaving the heroes totally stunned by the news. Xaden admitted that teleporting was a massive gamble, but Balin helped him track them down, while Temmie gave a quick sign to her that everything was going great. The demon lord was sure they'd never find this place or even figure out where it was, but he didn't say a single word back. The kid wondered who cast that crazy useful spell, making Vale pout at him. But then the Skeleton King mentioned only a dragon could do something like that, so everyone's eyes landed right on. The dragon girl finally admitted she was caught red-handed, and confessed that after ditching Astros on the battlefield, she came back and trapped the whole area inside a massive barrier. Vale was still fuming that Astros cut her meal short, which totally freaked Belena out, but then Kidden knelt down and thanked Vale for caring so much about him. The dragon says it's obvious since she's the one gobbling up all the master's food, but the freelooters just keep coming, and she's worried she'll run out of everything, leaving Plotty and Astros' subordinates totally speechless. Belon says she hates them just because of the food, but as Timmy and Astros nod, Caden pets her hair and tells her she's a good girl for always protecting him, making her. Keaton shouted that it was time to party for Astros and Zidane's wedding and to finally reward Vale for all her hard work. The Undead King was super hyped and asked to jump in, so Kidan just smiled and said yes, while Zayden and Astros were totally grateful. A bit later, they set up a massive feast outside, and Kedin gave a huge shout-out to the Demon Lord and Asteris for their wedding. Zidane finally took his first bite, making Astros super hyped to see his reaction while Batemi and Belena just looked on with big smiles. The Demon Lord's mind was totally blown by the flavor, admitting he'd never eaten anything this good before, while Kidan was just stoked that he liked it. Then Kidan brought out a massive plate of meat for Vale, who was so hyped she was already holding 2 spoons and ready to feast. She took one bite, her eyes snapped open, and she literally turned into a dragon, screaming and breathing fire because the food was so good. But Kidan immediately scolded her for transforming and spitting flames at the dinner table. She shifts back into her human form and swears she only did it because that meat was the best thing she's ever tasted, leaving Zidane totally blown away that she's a real. He told her it was actually Kurosaki deer meat Astris caught that day, and she definitely didn't see that coming. He explained how he sliced the meat and used magic spices, but Keaton realized he didn't work alone, which totally blew Vale's mind. She started laughing like a total villain, bragging that everyone else was just trash meant to serve her and her master, so Pletty snapped and threatened to deck her, but Astris just smirked and told her to bring it on. Kidding just laughed, saying Vale really helped them out despite his attitude, but Pletty admitted she still had a lot of growing up to do. She took a bite and realized Vale was totally right. Her husband's cooking had to stay a secret, and Zayden even admitted that not even kings in their palaces got to eat stuff this good. He nodded, finally getting why the dragon kept this place a secret, while Astris looked super worried about something. Pletty asked Kadan how he learned to cook such fire food, but Kadan was just surprised and said he only figured it out to survive while living alone, acting like it was no big deal. He also said his skill lets him whip up food from his own world, and he's pretty sure it makes his cooking even more legendary. He hands the plate to the Undead King and tells him he's just hyped they actually liked the food, whatever it was. Right then, Astra walks up and asks him if his cooking is some kind of classified state secret. Vale claimed it was a classified state secret, but Kidan shut him down and said it wasn't a secret at all. The woman dropped to her knees to face the boy, who was totally caught off guard and asked her what just happened. Astras decided to ask him one more time, begging to work for him so he could teach her how to be the perfect wife, which totally caught Kidan and the rest of the group off. Everyone was totally fuming and demanded to know why Astros was questioning someone else's husband, but the woman just giggled behind her hand and said she couldn't do it. Plotty gets totally ticked off and pouts, saying she's only good for swinging her hand chops, but Keaton steps in to tell her she's got way more skills than she thinks. He admitted she's the only reason he even bothers farming and cooking, and Plotty was so touched she just stared at him with total hard eyes. Kidden turned to the Demon Queen Astris and told her that someone like Coco should really be the one looking after her. She said no way, insisting she had to crush every challenge herself to be the perfect wife for the Demon Lord. And Batemi and Belina were totally hyped for their boss. Kadan smiled at how honest she was being, but then Zayden suddenly turned and asked to join the training, leaving Caden totally shocked. The guy asked if he wanted to join the wedding training, so Zadana agreed and said the whole place seemed super cool. From the kitchen to how they grow food for their own buildings, he thinks everything is super cool and totally gets why Astros wants to study here. He wants to give her that same support back, just like her husband does. He even explains how a married couple should always have each other's backs, just like Keaton does. He was totally hyped to hear that, and Platty said it made sense since he wasn't like those lazy kings who just sit around looking pretty in their palaces. Sedan told St. Kaiden one more time that he was totally counting on him, and Astros backed him up on that. A little while later, the orcs and goblins are busy building a new spot with Zidane helping out, and when he checks in on Keaton, the guy says he's doing awesome. He flexed about his crazy hand skills, but right then, Astros shouted his name. She walked in wearing an apron and mittens to serve the food, and Zidane turned bright red the second he saw her. Astros was super confused and asked what was wrong, but Zidane just played it cool while secretly thinking he was in heaven. The hero sits back down at the outdoor table piled with food as Keaton raves about the flavor. Vale starts inhaling his meal, and Platy hypes up Astros, but then she notices the Demon King is literally crying because the food is just that good. He asked what the meal was. Astra told him it was nikujaba, and Zidane was totally shocked when Kadan revealed she actually cooked almost all of it herself. He tells her that since she's a swordsman, she's already a pro with a blade, so she just needs to learn the ingredients and recipes, or she can hit the road. Butemi and Belena helped her out, and after she thanked them, she started wondering what else was left to do for the engagement. Amy's like, "Duh, it's clothes," and tells them they've got to learn how to sew, but then she notices the Demon King is just wearing a basic shirt. Batemio was totally shocked by Keaton's move, but he agreed and said that since he's a guy, he's the perfect person to design clothes for other dudes. He already promised to make Platy some new clothes, but he's totally stuck on what the design should look like. He snatched some fabric right off the table and told them to just hang on for a second. Keaton drops 3 rolls of fabric and says that's all he's got, but Patami is totally losing it because she's never seen anything this stunning before. This guy said he once explored a dungeon in the mountains and found a weird caterpillar that spits out silk threads. He decided to test things out by bringing some home and building them special cages, which totally caught Platy off guard. Keaton explained exactly how he made the fabric from caterpillars, and everyone was so shocked they couldn't even say a word. Temi stared at the cloth in her hands, totally blown away that it was actually made from caterpillar poop, while Belena just figured his ideas were way too wild for this world. But Temi's eyes lit up as she asked if it was actually okay to make girls' clothes out of caterpillar fabric. Keating asks if she can handle the job, and the Astro girl says she's totally got this since her parents own a fabric store and she knows her stuff. Astras was totally blindsided by the news while Belena thought it was awesome, but then Temi demanded it for herself, only for Kadan to call her his savior, and Astras jumped in. But Temi decided to kick things off by making a new outfit for Miss Platy, who just smiled and agreed, super hyped to see what they'd come up with. But Temi pulls out a rope and says once things wrap up, she's gonna measure its size. She tugs on the rope while wearing a super creepy smile. Platy has no idea why she knew Platy was getting her outfit first, but since she was making gear for the whole squad, she asked to measure everyone right then and there, which led to Platy asking if they should just start stripping down. With a quick flick of her hand, she made Bottomy scream and turn bright red, and when she asked if Platy always went commando, the girl didn't even know what that word meant. She suddenly remembered her husband had the exact same reaction when they first met. Back when Astras had to explain that as a mermaid, she didn't even know she needed to wear clothes on her bottom half. Platy asked if there was a problem, and Batama was totally shocked, telling her there definitely was. Astros explained that for both demons and surface people, showing off your lower half in public is actually a serious crime. Plenty freaked out and screamed about why she wasn't told, but Astros just said they didn't think she'd actually walk like that. The mermaid princess suddenly remembered seeing her brother putting on some weird gear, but Temi explained that it's just called underwear. Platy decided that lingerie is basically a tuxedo for world leaders, but Temi realized she wasn't even joking. She practically begged to take over, promising to show her why these clothes were so awesome, and even though Plenty was totally confused, she said she was counting on her. As the girl starts taking measurements, Batemi calls out Plenty for sucking in her stomach, making her turn bright red. Plenty complains that she's never been this stressed about her husband's cooking before, but Batemi just tells her it's totally normal. The girl kept measuring everyone and shouted that Astros' belly was way bigger than she thought, but Belena just teased that it was the power of love while a blushing Astros told her to shut up, leaving Vela wondering what these annoying pests were even doing. Finally, the outfit was finished, and Butemi hyped it up by saying the blue ruffles looked just like ocean waves, making it the perfect look for a mermaid princess like Platy. Keaton and Zayden were totally into it too. Then Batemi asked the girl if she was a fan, so Platy told them it was super unique and she really liked it, which made Kay. Platy walks up and he tells her she looks great, but then she mentions Batemi even made her underwear, making Keaton totally freak out. When she asks if talking about that is also off limits, the mermaid princess didn't even care because her brother made it look so cool, and Keaton promised himself he'd do the same for his brother-in-law next time. Vale kept staring at Platy's clothes in the weirdest way. Then she suddenly sparked a fireball and chucked it straight at her. The girl screams her head off while staring at the ball, and while Kidan thinks she's just acting jealous, Vale tells him to shut up and keep his eyes open. The fire vanished and the dress didn't have a single burn mark, leaving the mermaid princess looking totally confused. She started poking at the cloth, wondering how it didn't have a single burn mark, and Vale told her it's because the fabric is packed with anti-magic. The dragon girl was sure this dress had insane defense, making it way better than any boring old armor. Plotty asks what the heck Bottomy did to him, but she's totally confused and swears she didn't do a thing. So Belina gets really curious about what's actually going on while Plotty wonders if the caterpillar is the one with the secret powers. They ask Kid what he did with the caterpillars, and he tells them he's just being super careful so he can turn them into some fresh clothes for Plady. Vale agreed and said the orcs and goblins totally changed after meeting Keaton, so this caterpillar probably went through the exact same thing. The kid nodded, and while Vale was totally shocked to see a new legendary armor being born, Batemi shut him down and said it wasn't armor, it was fashion. Vale told Batemi to hurry up and make her that same armor, but the girl kept arguing it wasn't armor at all, even though Kadan was just hyped to have gear that was actually... He realized the Demon King was basically wearing old bed cotton, so he figured they should just have Batami remake the whole outfit. Zidane figured it was just another wild surprise, but then Aster looked right at him and totally caught his eye. She noticed his clothes were all ripped up and figured he just got snagged on something while he was on the job. He spotted a tiny rip on the side and couldn't believe he'd actually put a hole in the shirt Kidan gave him. Astra said she'd handle it but then got all shy, admitting she's still a total beginner, so the Demon Lord thanked her and told her he'd leave the rest to her. Everyone stared as Zayden stripped off his shirt so Asterisk could stitch up the hole, and Kidden figured it was totally fine for the Demon King to keep the shirt for a bit longer. Everything is going down in the human kingdom where a voice suddenly growls about hating the dragon, and it turns out to be the king himself. While sipping his drink, he realizes that because of this beast, the advisor reports that the generals at the front still have zero clue why that dragon even showed up. Since they're confused, they're telling the entire army to just sit tight and wait. He asks who the dragon's master is, but when he brings up the name Saint Kidden, the advisor tells him they've got absolutely nothing on the guy. The king sips his drink and calls everyone totally worthless, making his advisor start apologizing like crazy. Suddenly, the king just chucks his glass onto the floor. The advisor is standing right there, watching the whole thing go down. Then the king barks at him to go grab another cup. The advisor is totally grossed out that the king is actually drinking that junk, while the king just complains that the whole situation is a total disaster. He lets out a heavy sigh, thinking about how they were so close to finally winning a war that's been raging for hundreds of years. King Junxus the 18th had to stop the massive war between humans and demons, so he used every bit of power from the Manicunctuary to summon heroes from another. The king figures if they wipe out the demons, they can just steal their power for the kingdom and call it a day, right as his advisor hands him a glass of fish juice. Magdati thinks the dragon is the first problem to solve, but then he asks his advisor if there's actually a master behind it, and the advisor admits that plenty of people are doubting it too. The advisor warns that one wrong move will just set him off, and if that dragon shows up again, it's game over for everyone. The king is just vibing with his juice and totally ignoring his advisor, but then the thought of everything being destroyed finally hits him, and he snaps back to reality the second he hears those words. The king slams his glass onto the throne, splashing juice everywhere, and orders his advisor to hunt down Saint Coden because if they can get him on their side, they're guaranteed to win. The advisor thinks he's right but asks how to track them down, so the king tells him to go build a search party full of elite heroes. The advisor mentions rumors of a civil war in the demon capital, but the king gets even more ticked off, says he doesn't care, and decides to disband the army for now. He orders the whole country to throw every resource they have at Saint Codan, and his advisor is totally on board. The king swears he's going to find Saint Codan for sure. Meanwhile, in a totally different time and place, there was this house. It was built in that classic old-school Japanese style. Inside, someone is pouring a drink into a cup. The guy mentions they've been here for 2 whole months, and the girl says they've actually learned a ton. The guy takes a few sips of his drink and lets out a heavy sigh. He tells the girl they need to get the feel for the sword again. He pulls the blade out, looking. Astros asks the Demon King what's on his mind, and he tells her that the holy sword Ainlof is starting to act up. The Demon King points out the sword is reacting to someone, and after a long silence, something finally clicks for Astros. A bit later, they go looking for Holy Lord Caden, who yells that he's right there and asks the Demon King what's on his mind. The Demon King stares down the Holy Lord and asks Kitten what that weapon in his hands is even supposed to be. Keaton says this sword is a total beast that slices through anything, and he literally just used it to rip right through mana metal. Platty reveals that's the holy sword they snatched from the teacher's undead king dungeon, and she's pretty mad that they're treating it like total junk. The Demon King was totally blown away that the Swindler's Holy Lord actually had the legendary devil sword Dr. Schwarz, and while Norio tried to give it back to his teacher, the The flesh princess turns to Norio and thanks him for saving her from the undead king. But he just says he had no choice because he didn't even understand his god powers yet. The demon king and the girl are totally stunned by Norio's words, and the king reveals that according to the legends, a saint's holy power can actually transform into the strength of a hero. Norio remembers the undead king's teacher saying the exact same thing, and now the demon king is staring him down, guessing he's a hero summoned from another world. Norio takes a second to think and admits the demon king actually has a point, but the king isn't buying his story for a second. Norio gets all hyped up and finally admits what the crew already suspected. He's actually from another world, and since he has zero fighting skills, the demon king literally kicked him out of the... So Norio started wandering this land all alone, far away from any other humans, and the demon king is in total shock. The girl turns to Norio and asks if this was supposed to be a challenge, but he just says it's easy as he kneels down to grab a handful of dirt. He clenches his fist to show off his skills, making a tiny flower sprout right out of a handful of dirt. The demon king is totally shocked to see this bud sprout, but Norio explains it's a gift from the gods meant for a chill, peaceful life. The demon king totally got it and said her power was basically a miracle, but it wouldn't help her in a real fight, so Norio had to find a way to get even stronger if she wanted to beat the undead king. Out of nowhere, Norio reveals he can use his gift for way more than they thought, like unlocking the hidden potential of anything he touches. The demon king and Astros are totally shocked by the insane power of Dr. Short's devil ball, but Norio tells them that being the strongest doesn't mean anything if it's just about raw strength. The demon king's voice actually shakes as he admits that absolutely no one in this world has power like Norio's. The demon king is staring at the insane power the gods gave Norio, and he asks if he's ready to prove he's better than all the humans, and finally head back to his... Nor just shuts the whole thing down, and even though it's a total diss to the demon king fighting the humans, he doesn't care because he's not on anyone's... Norio claims he's a free man just so he can marry Princess Plotty. Then shyly looks right at her husband while the demon king stares down the holy lord, Norio. He admits the light lord is right, because without him, things would get way more serious with the mermaids who are also fighting in this war. The demon king looks at Sansedan Norio and realizes he's a massive deal for the world's future, so he offers a toast to hope and everything going perfectly. Saint Lord Norio is totally stunned but super hyped as he looks at the demon king, shaking his hand and backing up every word he just said. A bit later, the demon king and Astros head back to the Lord's Saint, and he brags about how they punished everyone who was just slacking off while they were gone. The demon king decides to take out even more traitors to win the people's hearts, and Norio is absolutely loving the move. Norio's totally impressed by their master plan since he thought they were just on a honeymoon, while Vale asks the girls in the back why they never ride with the demon king. The girls get a little shy after his worried question, but they tell him that as long as they're around, the demon king can come back whenever he wants. Vale suddenly shifts into a dragon and shouts that the Miyagam is taking the girls to the demon realm, while Norio desperately tries to get him to chill out. The sea calls the demon king over to stock up on food, and a girl named Belena steps up, saying her only job is to connect him to this new land. The demon king thanks Belena for the help, but he's already eyeing a girl named Batemi, who decides to stick around since she's Belena's best friend. Batama asks the demon king if she can stick around to keep making clothes, and Norio thinks that's a total win. Batama walks up to Miss Astris looking super awkward but also deep in thought, while she just stands there totally clueless. Out of nowhere, she's wearing this stunning dress, but Emma reveals she actually made it for the legendary Miss Astris, the girl the demon king was totally obsessed with. She was so happy she actually started tearing up while thanking Batemi, and the second the demon king offered her an asterisk to keep moving, she was totally down for it. A glowing magic circle pops up behind the demon king and Astris as they wave goodbye, promising their friends they'll definitely see them again. The whole squad cheers them on, and a bit later, a portal pops open for the demon king and Asterisk to dive right into. The demon king looks right at Astris and admits that for the longest time, he never thought peace between demons and humans was actually possible. Astris is pretty confused by the demon king's words, but the king keeps going, saying that seeing the Lord Saint made him realize his old dream was actually real. Astros walks right up to the demon king, and when he asks for her help to make his dream come true, she says yes without even blinking. Way before the demon king ever went back home, Norio walked up to a stranger and challenged him to a fight, not realizing it was the demon king himself, who actually took a long time to think it over. The demon king is hyped to see what it's like and test Saint Kitten's true power, but since Noria is totally trash at handling the ball, they have to keep the plan super simple. Out of nowhere, an arena slams onto the ground. Norio suggests they settle things with Sumo. The demon king asks him to repeat that, and Norio explains it's just two guys. He explains that both fighters have to stay inside the circle, and while the Demon King thinks they're fighting until someone can't move, Noria shuts that idea down fast. Noria gets right in the Demon King's face and grabs him, telling him he needs to learn how to hold his enemies like this. Norio explains that the Demon King isn't allowed to land a single hit, so he has to drag his opponent out of the ring since any kind of striking is totally banned. The king finally got the picture and said it looked like a piece of cake, and after Noria agreed, the Demon King immediately squared up and challenged Norio to a fight. Norio said, they face off on opposite sides of the ring and the fight kicks off. They charge forward and slam into each other right away. Norio tries to shove the Demon King out of the circle. Suddenly, Norio remembers his pro-sumo moves and catches the Demon King totally off guard, slamming him straight into the dirt. The Demon King was completely lost, and Norio actually started apologizing, saying he didn't mean for things to go down like that. The Demon King tells the saint to stay out of the fight again, so she listens and calls for Okubo, but suddenly a voice cries out for help. It's the Mermaid Prince, and he's looking at Sankadan totally lost, while the Demon King is just as shocked to see him standing there. The Mermaid Princess is totally shocked the Demon King is actually here, but Norio tells her to keep it together and help him come up with a plan. The Demon King and the Mermaid Prince are actually facing off in a sumo match with Norio acting as the ref. And since Norio shouts that they're still in the ring, out of nowhere, an ogre named Okubo shouts over to Nori. Noryu tells the district they need to bring in way more guys. A bunch of beast people start jumping into the ring. The guys at the office had a total blast with the fight, and it wasn't long before everyone there was completely obsessed with sumo. After all those crazy long fights, Prince Arwana finally took the crown, and Norio was totally shocked that mermaids could actually stand on their own 2 feet that well. A little while later, a voice in Norio's house shouts that the bread is finally done, and a girl immediately takes a huge, crunchy bite. It's the princess in her fancy dress, and she's totally obsessed with how soft it is, while Vale is also losing it over how amazing this bread tastes. The girls are totally loving the bread, realizing that even though food exists in every world, the taste and texture here are completely different. The princess asks her husband what this bread stuff is, and Norio explains it's the main food back in his world that can be used to make all kinds of other meals. Norio brags that this is just another new trick he's added to his collection, but then Vale shows up and tells him to hurry up and make more for her already. But before that, the Lord Saint wants to get one more thing ready, some actual food from his world that he's planning to grow next. It turns out the secret item is just rice, leaving the girls completely baffled while Vale starts wondering if it actually tastes any good. The Lord Saint describes these sweet white grains as a totally different version of wheat, which completely shocks the princess, especially when Norio points out that rice is actually grown the exact same way. The Flesh Princess is totally shook by her husband's words, so she turns to him and says they seriously need to change the plan. The princess says the Oregon team is handling all the construction right now, while these orcs are out there grinding in the fields. The new recruit who joined after the demons broke loose handles the sewing. Belena manages their roots. Everyone helps out when it gets busy, and they've even got a totally brainless dragon on the squad. Vale explains she's the one stopping invaders, digging out the fields, and even moving entire buildings, and the princess totally agrees, saying everyone is super busy with their own work. The princess shows up and loses it because they didn't use their powers for the back-breaking work of harvesting and grinding the wheat, and the other girls are totally on her side. The princess starts losing it, yelling that she's the only one actually putting in the work. She's been handling all the medicine and food fermentation by herself. Everyone is totally floored by her. The princess starts listing off all her hard work, from making fertilizer for the fields to producing meat and soy sauce and even managing the yeast in the cold storage room. The princess stands back up and admits she can't handle all this work alone, so her husband drops to his knees and begs for her forgiveness. He starts tearing up because he realized he bit off way more than he could chew with all his big plans, calling himself a total failure of a husband. But the princess just chills him out and says it's all good since he finally gets it now. The wolf says he's doing this for a top-tier meal and tells the princess to hang tight, but she just tells Vale to shut his mouth. Suddenly, a voice cuts right through the princess and Vale's conversation, and it's the mermaid prince, brother-in-law. Noria starts begging for forgiveness and calls him a total failure of a husband, but he's completely clueless and asks the princess to explain what's happening. He says he made a deal with the saint to sell pickled radishes, so he's finally here to buy them. The princess loses her mind when she realizes her brother-in-law ordered all those radishes, and now he's desperately trying to get her to chill out. The princess mentions that the immortal king next door is actually obsessed with this radish, and when she asks the crew why they're so into fermented food, the brother-in-law just says it's super tasty and keeps them healthy. Vel says the bread is super tasty, and the girls totally agree, mentioning how many fermented foods there are even though they're demons who aren't actually good at medical magic. The princess snaps and says her work is messing people up, so her husband just starts sobbing and begs her to forgive him. Right then, the princess gets a genius idea and tells her brother-in-law he showed up at the perfect time, because she realized she can find people to handle her massive workload, and experts who... The princess asks her brother to bring some mermaids over, and when her brother-in-law gets confused, she threatens to jack up the price of pickled radishes. She turns to her husband, and he says if it's actually possible, he's totally down, so the Holy Lord looks over at his brother-in-law, who starts thinking it. The princess starts begging her brother for a taste of her husband's rice, and Norio is totally blushing at how cute she's acting. The brother-in-law hesitates and says moving the sea people is going to be a huge pain, but Norio isn't backing down and asks him one more time. Shirena asks the Holy Lord if the mermaids are actually terrified of the shore, and even though Norio thought they just hated him, the dress starts to vibe with it, so Shirena finally works up the guts to say what's on his mind. He calls the princess a total weirdo, and right then, the brother-in-law's sister loses her cool and stands up in a total rage. She's totally confused why he's being so sudden, but he just explains that to any normal mermaid, the surface world is a total living hell. The girls totally got it since mermaids are basically fish, and while the brother-in-law says most sea folks can survive on land, Platy is a total one-of-a-kind for choosing to stay there forever. Her brother-in-law says that thanks to the flesh medicine, he can move between land and water whenever he wants, and Princess Platy is totally hyped to hear it. Before all this, it was just a story where humans faced crazy side effects like losing their voice, or literally turning into bubbles and vanishing. Vela shows up and orders the mermaids to stay in the water, but her brother-in-law shuts her down, saying they need those goods for their diplomatic deals. The brother-in-law says that until some super strong medicine shows up, most sea creatures won't ever crawl onto land on their own. Sharanj explains that along with better medicine, they need a new system to kick out all the criminals, leaving the sea and the rest of the group totally stunned by his words. One line out. The input has 2 sentences. I should probably keep it as one continuous thought or 2 sentences on one line. Shorn explains that besides the worst punishments, Lord Saint and the whole crew are absolutely stunned by what the brother-in-law just dropped, as he claims the shore will always be a living hell for the sea dwellers, and says the princess is, to heal someone's body, you've got to be a master at brewing potions. But even with the king's orders to get backup, staying out in the field for this long is a total... The princess totally backs up her brother-in-law and suggests dumping the exiled criminals right here, leaving Shorin and the rest of the crew absolutely floored by what she just said. Surek starts losing his mind and screaming that they can't do this because the mermaid kingdom is deep in debt to the Holy Lord, so using his land as a prison is totally off limits, but the lore flower just says there's no problem at all. Norio's worried about the board getting wrecked, but Shorn says the Holy Lord isn't scared of anything, and it's actually the bad guys who should be running for their... Out of nowhere, Vale transforms into a dragon and snaps that she's sick of everything and will roast anyone who shows up, while Platy tells her brother that if he wants those pickled rads... The Princess of Flesh doesn't care if her helpers are straight-up criminals, because as long as they've got skills, she's hyped to have them on her side. The Princess of Flesh claims she's sending everyone straight to heaven, while her husband starts apologizing for pushing her way too far. Sharon finally shows up with some backup, and standing right there in front of Norio are 3 girls wearing almost nothing. Vale is totally confused and wonders if it's actually normal to... He clears his throat and apologizes for bothering the Lord Saint before reintroducing the girls, making sure to point out that the one on the right isn't a pufferfish, the middle. Norio has no idea why his brother-in-law brought these girls along, but since they're actually criminals, he's told to keep a super close eye on them. Lord St. Norio thanks the girls for showing up, introduces himself as Kaden, and tells them he's stoked to finally meet them. Pufferfish remembers exactly what the prince warned her about this guy. The angler is totally shocked she has to work for such a weak landowner, and Gara Rufa is just being lazy and... Out of nowhere, a voice cuts them off. It's Princess Platy, and she tells the girls they need to get moving right now. Everyone is totally stunned to see the princess standing right there. It was the ice-cold witch Rafa, and both the Hellfire witch Runpai and the plague witch Garufa were totally shocked to see the group standing there. The brother-in-law just branded these girls as criminals, so now they're being shipped off to a prison camp run by his sister, Princess Platy. Ronpiece is totally tripping over her words, but then she just dives into Princess Lady's arms with a huge grin, while her brother-in-law Norial watches the whole thing looking completely lost. Rumpai instantly drops to one knee because it's been forever since she saw Princess Platy, leaving her brother-in-law and Norio totally shocked by what's going on. Ronpai is totally shocked she gets to work for the princess again, and her eyes start watering up like crazy as she tries her best not to cry. Because to her, this is literally She calls out Ron Pai as the criminal. Her brother-in-law backs her up, and it turns out this whole trio is actually super famous for being troublemakers back home. Rafa smirks and talks trash, saying Ron Pai is only famous for sucking up to the royals. But Rufa cuts her off and reveals that Rafa is actually obsessed with Prince Arawana, which is the real reason she showed up. Rafa loses her temper and screams that she's just showing her what life is like outside the ocean instead of being stuck in a cage. But the other girl just stops for a second before hitting back. Rufa is totally lost and has no clue what the plan is. Ron Pai swears he's going to protect the princess no matter what. Pei is ready to keep going until her body literally. Rafa asks them one more time since she's totally down to help end the world. But Plotty shuts the whole plan down just to focus on their art. Norio asks Sharon what crimes the three of them actually pulled off, and even though she's a bit confused, she starts telling the whole story. He explains that in the Mermaid Kingdom, there were 6 mages who used beastly potions and were called the Crazy 6 Witches, but Shuren only brought 3 of them, making Norio and the girl ask him to say that one more time. He starts with Rafa's story, a girl who can sense mana deep in the ocean, and even tried to build a way to control it, thinking the whole thing was totally fine. Shuren says if Rafa could control mana, she'd use all the water to wipe out every human and demon, and Norio is totally freaked out. Brother-in-law explains that Rafa is a total pro and a dangerous radical, which is exactly why she's locked up, and now Norio finally sees the whole picture. He asks about the girl with glasses, and his brother-in-law reveals she's actually a hardcore criminal named Gara Rufa, which totally catches Norio off guard. Rufa was a total big shot in the mermaid medical world, and Norio really looks up to her for doing such cool work. Brother-in-law starts explaining Rufa's weird theory, but she cuts him off, acting totally bummed that nobody gets how cool her experiments actually are. Rufa gets totally fired up explaining his theory that tiny, invisible monsters are actually the ones making people sick. Her brother-in-law just didn't get why Rufa was so hyped, but Norio figured out those invisible creatures she was talking about were actually just microbes. Norio thought back and remembered that even Princess Platy was totally shocked when he first explained how yeast and fermentation worked. Rufa starts yelling for everyone to listen up, explaining that once the body remembers these tiny monsters it can finally fight back, and Norion realizes she's talking about an immune reaction. Rufa keeps going on about his wild theory to take blood from survivors and pump it into the sick so they can fight the virus. And that's when Noriel realizes he's basically describing a blood transfusion. Shuren starts acting all dramatic, claiming that mixing someone's blood is a total death sentence, but then Rufa shows up and gets confused by his weird logic. Since Norio is from another, Norio asks about the girl kneeling in front of the princess, but Brother Law warns him that she's a total troublemaker. Shuren reveals that this girl was actually one of the king's top guards, but then Norio shows up and asks why someone like her is stuck behind bars. His brother-in-law says the whole problem is that his sister is still single, and since demons and humans are both fighting to marry her for power, the mermaids are totally split. Shuren says a mermaid noble from the neutral side was totally against marriage and even went straight to Shuren's dad, the king, to protest the whole idea. His brother-in-law acted totally chill, saying there's zero risk if the engagement falls through because they'll eventually just give up and walk away on their own. This noble dude totally ran his mouth, saying the princess only knows about medicine and would be a total failure as a wife no matter who she ends up with. Ron Pai heard those words and totally lost it, beating that noble to a pulp right on the spot until he was a complete wreck. Suddenly, Ron Pai pops out and scares Shuren half to death, making her immediately scream that the whole mess wasn't even her fault. She claims some snobby noble started the whole mess by insulting Platya, and since Ron Pai refuses to apologize, her brother-in-law tells Norio she's been locked up too. The brother-in-law begs for mercy for bringing those creepy girls, but Plotty tells him it's way too late to change anything now. Norio asks Dee if she's doing okay, making her blush with joy because she's so hyped he cares, while her brother-in-law just keeps a straight face and says. Platty snaps at Shuren, yelling that he never should have been looking after her in the first place. Then, Shuren turns to Mr. Norio because he's got one. Norio is starting to freak out, but she has no memory of her crimes, and her brother-in-law claims Platty is the absolute worst witch for using illegal potions to cause a massive disaster that nobody can stop because she's basically untouchable by the royals. All this earned Platty the nickname Crown Witch, and now Noriel is totally spiraling because he can't stop thinking about his wife being a literal witch. Her brother-in-law leaves everything to Platty since she's the only one who can handle one of the 6, and she tells him he can totally count on her. Platty is super hyped because her workload just got way smaller, while Norio and the others are just staring at her like she's totally lost it. Ron Pai is super hyped to serve the princess again, shouting, "Pay!" and calling this place a total paradise, while Rafa just wants to know what kind of crazy world they've actually landed in. Nurio reveals that a guy named Kitten is the boss here, and even though Rafa and Rufa are sure this place belongs to humans, they can't forget that girl they saw wearing a cloth that looked just like a demon. Next up, a goblin and an ogre run over to Norio to tell him the pizza oven is finally finished, and he gives Okubo and Gubunshan props for all their hard work. The witch girls show up and are totally blown away by what's going on. They can't believe their eyes seeing an ogre and a goblin actually talking to Mr. Norio. Suddenly Vale cuts them off, telling them their opinions are worthless and their only job is to help the mermaid cook up even better food. The girls stare at Vale, totally confused why this tiny kid is trying to protect them. Vale definitely hated what she just heard. Suddenly, she starts glowing so bright that the whole room is blinded by light. Vale shifts into a dragon and flexes that she's way taller than them now, totally terrifying the witch team with her massive new size. They've got no clue how that world-ending dragon ended up here, and the shock is so intense that Garurufa just blacks out on the spot. Noreo shuts Vale up by threatening to take her food away, and once she finally chills, he announces a massive pizza party to celebrate the 3 witches arriving. Vale has literally never heard of pizza, so Norio tells her she'll get the hype once she tries a slice, while Rafa is just left wondering who this random guy even is. Plati drops the bombshell that this guy is her husband, leaving Runpai and Rafa totally frozen in shock. They're completely losing their minds, and then Rampai just blacks out and Rafa suddenly hears a voice and spins around to see a skeleton in a robe and hat thanking everyone for the invite to the newcomer party. Rafa's voice is shaking as she realizes that's the immortal king, and she's totally freaked out that 2 world-level disasters are standing in the exact same spot. Rafa passes out and hits the ground right after, but Plati says the party isn't starting until these girls finally wake up. After a bit, she finally blinks her eyes open. She's laying in a super comfy bed. Suddenly, she bolts upright and jumps out of the covers. Her friends are already right there. Ronpai is totally lost, but Rafa explains they're in a weirdly built house that smells amazing and has a super comfy bed. Rampai realizes Prince Sarawana only brought them to the surface to force them into hard labor. But right then, a maid named Belena suddenly bursts into the room. The girls are totally stunned as they realize she's actually a demon, and when Belena mentions a deal from St. Coden and tells them where to go, they're just left scratching their heads. Rampai finally realizes who they're talking about, so she calls out to Princess Plati and starts sprinting toward her like crazy. She drops to her knees and starts calling the princess miserable and unlucky, all because she was forced to marry a demon in this total nightmare of a place. The princess has no clue what hell they're talking about, and insists this guy is her husband, so the mermaid asks her again, while Ronpai swears he's gonna send Kadan straight to. The other mermaids followed Ronpai and started grilling the princess about why a human was running Demon Land, but Belena shut them down by saying this place doesn't even belong to demons. Explaining this weird spot is gonna be a total headache, and the princess knows it. When Rufa asks what the deal is, the princess tells her that this place is actually its own independent territory. She tells them they're in the village of St. Codon, but the girls are totally confused and think calling it a village is actually kind of an insult, especially since Someone asks who thinks this war is gonna end so easily, totally spooking Ramp, but Ronpai recognizes her right before she reveals she's actually the dragon Grinzel Vale. Right as she remembers seeing the immortal king, the man himself suddenly appears right next to her. The mermaid girls are absolutely losing it because the immortal king just showed up out of nowhere, and they're terrified he's about to send them all to the next life. Beline admits she was totally shocked at first, but she confirms that these 2 are actually the ones guarding the immortal king and the dragon veils. Ronpai is totally blown away, but he finally sees this place is just as epic as any other country, while the princess tells the mermaids they're safe now, and Vale adds that Vale mocks them as pathetic fishtails and says they're only working to feed the princess, but she snaps back that it's not just for her. Rafa figures they're just here to be the cooks, but Ronpai starts rolling away in tears, telling the princess she's really hit rock bottom until the princess asks her to say that one more time. The princess tells them she's taking them to their new job site before dinner, and asks Henbane to give her husband the heads up, which Henbane promises she'll totally do. Rafa's losing his mind that they're actually stuck cooking, Rufo's busy digging for info, and Ronpai is already plotting a way to bust the princess out of there. They finally make it to the spot, and as the princess swings the doors open to show them their new job, the mermaid girls are totally blown away by what they see. A super weird smell hits them, but it's actually not gross at all, and the princess explains that this is where she makes all her special spices and cooking ingredients. The mermaid girl spotted some dark liquid, so the princess told her it was soy sauce and scooped some into a cup for the girls to try. The girls are totally shocked by where this soy sauce actually comes from, and the princess even says it tastes just like the medicine they use to flavor their food. The girls take turns slowly dipping their fingers into the soy sauce. They slowly bring them up to their lips. Then they finally taste the sauce. They serve it up instantly to catch everyone off guard. The girls are losing their minds over how good this soy sauce is since it's got the perfect mix of flavors, and the princess totally agrees with them. Rampai tells everyone the princess made some insane medicine, but she's totally confused and says she didn't even create it. The princess explains her husband told her the secret that this stuff is actually made by a bunch of tiny microbes and living organisms. Rufa is instantly hooked on the princess's words, and even though she says she doesn't get what I'm saying, you can already tell something massive is going down. The princess explains they were just doing the same kind of research, and Rufa totally backs her up. Rufa stares at the bowl of soy sauce in her hands, realizing those tiny creatures she imagined are actually living inside. And the princess tells her she's 100% right. Rufa started crying happy tears because her research was totally right, and she was so hyped that this sauce was actually made by tiny fermenting microbes. Rufa gets so hyped she tries to chug the whole bottle of soy sauce, but the princess stops her before she accidentally sends herself to the afterlife. She tells the story of how she tried to taste soy sauce for the first time, but her husband actually stepped in and stopped her. Rafa's a bit salty that someone's already using her research, but she's also super hyped to study these microbes more since the princess is totally counting on her. The girls are super sketched out by this holy man who's clearly hiding something, but their jaws hit the floor when the princess reveals her husband is actually a legendary hero. Ron Pies calls him out, saying Rafa is so obsessed with his research that he doesn't notice anything else. She explains that summoned heroes are basically people pulled from another world to take down demons and save everyone. Rafa is totally shocked when Ron Pie says everyone else has their own secrets, but Ron just shrugs and says humans being trash is nothing new. The princess explains that the human king dragged her husband to this world but kicked him out for being weak, so now he's surviving by using all his pro skills from his old life. Suddenly, a voice cuts them off. It's the Dragon Veil, and she's so starving that she decides you and Mister are both just super mad at those girls. Finally, 4 different pizzas are served up on trays, and the mermaid girls are totally blown away by this food from another world, while the Holy Lord gets ready to slice it all up. He slices up the pizza and hands everyone a plate, starting with the Dragon Veil, who is totally hyped to get hers. Ron Pie mentions that Lord Sankadan is actually super clever, and as the whole squad sits around a table overflowing with food, they all wish each other a good meal and get ready to feast. The mermaid girls grabbed the pizza slices and started digging in, and their minds were totally blown because they'd never tasted anything like this before. Bonpix is freaking out because the food is way too good, and they can't believe something from another world tastes this insane, while Rufa says the flavor is so intense her soul is basically floating to heaven. The Lord Saint is super hyped that the girls are loving the meal, while Ron Pie just stands there watching quietly. Next, the Lord Saint serves the teacher and brother-in-law their absolute. Out of nowhere, the princess remembers her big brother and tells him she's making a massive batch of pickled radishes, so he better not be shy about buying some. Her brother, Rafa, is totally losing it because Prince Arowana is showing up next week, and she can't believe this guy who's basically a ghost even to the merfolk is actually coming that fast. Rufa is absolutely loving the chaos, teasing Rafa that she didn't say a word, while Norio asks his wife if they have any more, and she tells him they definitely do. The princess is totally hyped because her man's cooking is straight fire once again. The saint asks her about the tomatoes since he knows she's obsessed with them. They both just start laughing, and Ron Pie has no clue what the princess sees in this guy, but she looks totally stoked to be with him. Once night hits, the mermaid girls head to their room to flop onto a super comfy bed, and Rafa mentions how amazing the food was. Rufus says those tiny creatures are the real MVPs, and Ranpai admits that Kadan is actually a total beast at working. The girls start chatting about their day while chilling on the bed Batumi made for them. It feels incredibly smooth and soft to the touch. It's actually made of silk, which is this. The girls start to realize this place might actually be a total paradise instead of a nightmare, while outside the building, the night is pitch black without a moon in sight. Rafa finally finishes her work, but then Rufa bursts in to interrupt her, begging for help with her own chores while holding out this weird curved object. She wants to soak this dried radish in wheat miso, so Rafa asks her to repeat that. Then he laughs and tells her it's full of mold and totally gross. So this is how you prep pickled radishes, but Rafa's already dreaming about the prince tasting her food, and even though Rufa loves the idea, Rafa totally denies ever saying it. Rafa asks where Ranpai disappeared to, so Rufa explains she's just out hunting with the orcs since she's a total fitness nut who loves the exercise, and sure enough, Pai spots something moving out of the corner of her eye. Suddenly, a wild boar lunges out on command. She doesn't even blink and gets ready to strike. As the boar charges, the orcs are totally hyped and celebrating, while Pai acts like this was a total piece of cake for a royal knight like her. But once night falls, the Lord Saint starts talking about those 3 mermaids, and the princess admits they've been a massive help. She says they didn't just help her husband, they actually vibed so well with the juices and goblins that they finished the radish field in record time. The husband says the seeds are ready to plant, and once they grow, they'll finally get to taste that rice from his own world. The Holy Lord says cooking rice is actually super special to him, and when the princess looks at her husband for an answer, he gives her nothing, leaving her to get lost in her own head and start. She tells him they've got to cook this rice super fast, and her husband says he's totally on it. The rice field was finally ready for action with all the sprouts and boxes set out, but the mermaid girls were just standing there totally confused about what to do next. The gang finds out they're planting sprouts today, and when Rafa asks if rice goes straight into the water, the princess tells her she's totally right. Rafa begs him to stop so she doesn't ruin the clothes he made her, but Batemi just thanks her and says they were actually made for getting dirty in the fields. Rufa explains that since the saint is finally gone, she's using this rice to brew some killer sake that's going to taste incredible, and she's positive Prince Arohana is going to love every drop. Rafa says this is exactly why they're here and she's dying to try that rice, while Rufa is super hyped to be working with the person they just defeated. Pai tells the princess there's no way she's letting her get dirty, so she demands all the work for herself, promising she'd go through fire and water just to keep her safe. Vale is stuck working even though she totally hates it, so the princess asks her husband to show everyone the pro way to plant rice. He tells them to grab 3 or 4 seedlings and pinch them right between their thumb and finger. He shows them exactly how to dunk the seedlings into the water. Everyone is totally on board with his plan. And then the princess announces a massive rice planting tournament for the whole village. Everyone wades into the water one by one, and while the freezing cold gives Rufa major goosebumps, Pai is actually stunned by how perfectly Rafa is handling her job. The maid girls were on it, running fresh seedlings over to the rest of the team. Soon, every single villager was busy planting those sprouts in the water. Even the mermaid girls and the dragon. The mermaid girls are totally complaining because this job is way harder than they thought, with Rufus's legs giving out and Rampai's back absolutely killing her. The servant girls are totally fuming because this job is way more brutal than working out in the fields. One of them finally hits her limit and collapses face first straight into the water. But even a saint rushes over to check on Batemi, but Vale just watches and calls them total weaklings while the princess asks her if she's finally getting tired. Vale reminds her she's a dragon with insane strength even in human form, but she's surprised the princess isn't tired at all, who just says she's got strong legs and is totally used to this kind of work. They challenge the princess to see who can finish first, and she just smirks, saying she's not about to lose to a girl who does nothing but eat and sleep. Both girls are totally locked in and ready to win. The rice planting contest finally kicks off. One girl just takes off and starts planting at lightning speed. Lord St. Kidden is totally lost and has no idea what's even happening. The mermaid girls are just staring in absolute shock at the sight. These two handled that first strip and everyone's losing it over how insane these skills are. And as the princess lands in first place, the dragon is closing in fast. The princess suddenly runs out of seedlings and calls for more, so Pai grabs a bunch and sprints over to get them to her just in time. Out of nowhere, Vela shoves Pai and sends her stumbling, leaving the other mermaid girls totally shocked while Pai is stuck way too far from the princess. The princess is totally shocked to see the field all trashed, but Pai says she's fine, even though she can't believe Vale still has insane dragon strength in his human form. Pai admits she totally underestimated the work and tells Princess Platy that her human legs are actually insane. Pai says training is all about the grind, but the princess isn't just doing this to get stronger. Then Vale pops up and reveals the real goal is just to eat some amazing food. Vale and the princess are basically drooling over the thought of rice, and while Pai knows this is all about the food, the princess keeps everyone hyped by hiding the fact that they have to finish the whole field today. Everyone grinded to finish the whole job in a single day, and thanks to the princess's magic items, the plants fully grew in just 1 month. Finally, the rice was done, and all the saints' best friends stared at it in total shock while he told them they could eat this stuff whenever they wanted, day or night. Vale is dying to try the rice and begs her master for a bite, but the princess steps in and says the husband has to be the first one to taste it. The maids say the princess worked her heart out to make that rice grow faster, and when the saint double checks, they swear it's the truth. They say the princess didn't just use fertilizer to make the rice grow like crazy. She actually sat right by the fields and asked everyone to help prep for a massive harvest. Lena starts giggling, so the princess tells her to cut the story short, leaving Kidan totally shocked and embarrassed by his wife's behavior, until the princess finally tells him to just taste the rice. Kidan nods along with his wife and scoops some rice into a cup, taking a small bite to test it out while the girls behind him watch with total excitement. The saint picks up a tiny bit of rice and slowly takes a bite. The princess is dying to know what her husband thinks. He tells her it tastes absolutely amazing. He's so happy. The princess is totally stunned by her husband, but then Vale pops up and begs the saint for a taste because the food looks so good she's literally tearing up. Saint tells Vale to hang tight while he whips up the side dish, because the full flavor of this meal is about to blow her mind. Ranpei says the princess worked super hard just to make this guy smile. She's really happy she gave it her all, and Rafa totally gets exactly how her friend is feeling. Rafa just shuts it down, saying she never even said that. The princess asks her husband why this rice is such a big deal to him, wondering if it's because it's the national food from his home world. The husband agrees with her, but he's got one more thing to say. He wants to thank everyone who helped him out, especially his wife for always having his back. Norio turns to Hephaestus to see how she's doing, since she's the only reason he's got this awesome life in the first place. He says sorry for being late, and hands her the rice ball with a huge thank you, telling her not to be shy, and to finally try the food they worked so hard to make together. The princess warns her husband that this food is actually dangerous, because even though the rice seemed bland at first, it becomes a total flavor bomb once you eat it with the other dishes. The girls totally agree with the princess, saying they can't go back to a world without this food, and Fail even begs her master for another plate. The saint's sure the girls were obsessed with the rice, but Rafa thinks the stuff is actually terrifying, and Vanity's already hyped to cook up a bunch of new meals now that Plotty and Vale are completely stunned because they didn't realize more food was coming, and they had no clue you could actually make rice better with side dishes. Out of nowhere, Vale jumps up and says she's heading back to her dungeon to crank the difficulty way up, leaving Saint totally stunned while the princess thinks it's a genius move. Keaton is totally confused about what rice has to do with this, but the princess explains that leveling up the dungeon path means brand new monsters are about to start spawning. Vale totally backs up what the princess is saying. She explains that this trick makes everything taste way better, not just the rice. Kitten is left shocked because he had no clue you could even pull off. Rafa explains that only top-tier monsters like dragons are strong enough to actually mess with the dungeon's layout. This dungeon follows its own set of rules, since it's literally bursting. The princess reveals that only one of the two world disasters can actually change the dungeon, and while Vale backs her up, Kitten isn't trusting her for a second. Rafa couldn't believe all these miracles were actually happening at once. She's honestly blown away by how insane this place is. Rufa remembers that Rafa was busy researching how the princess wants to focus on prepping the food, but Ron Pai is itching to test her strength in Lady Vale's new dungeon, even though the dragon calls her a total weakling who can't handle the challenge. Everyone's hyped to see what happens, so she's setting up a bunch of levels to test Ron's limits, but the princess can already tell this is going to be a total disaster. A few days later, Dragon Vale is finally ready to show off her new dungeon, so she tells the whole squad to raid it together while Saint gets totally annoyed by her voice booming from. The princess says they're just checking out new monsters, but she's got a bad feeling the final bosses are waiting as the crew heads into the Veiled Engine. Ron Pai thinks the Saint is with them, the same guy the king summoned from another world and then tossed out for having 0 powers. She's not sure the Saint can handle this massive dungeon, but she's ready to protect the princess with everything she's got. Out of nowhere, the squad spots something moving up ahead, just as a pack of wild boars charges them. But Ron Pai tells everyone to step back, because she's taking them all on herself. The girl is totally stunned when the immortal king suddenly shows up, and with just a quick wave of his hand, the whole herd is completely wiped out. The immortal king thinks this whole quest is actually pretty fun, so he decides to join the squad right as Vale speaks up. She orders him to stop messing with her dungeon and bans him for good, just as Dragon Claws suddenly snatch the immortal king by his collar. Vale disqualifies the immortal king for cheating, but the team actually thanks him because he saved them from getting totally wrecked by all those monsters. Ron Peace grumbles that being friends with 2 walking disasters totally wrecks her pride as a royal knight, letting the whole team finally breathe easy. She takes it all back and says her only job is to protect the princess, while the couple thinks about switching up the dungeon since they've only run into monsters they already know. Vale tells everyone to stay cool since they're in the old zone, but she warns it'll be a total mess if the old monsters vanish before they reach the new zone waiting up ahead. After walking for a bit, they finally hit an open field, and the princess tells her husband to stay on guard since they both feel someone watching them, while Rampai warns that some seriously powerful. Out of nowhere, something sneaks up right behind Rand Pai. They're totally confused and have no idea what's happening. Then something lunges out of the tall grass to attack. Ketan thinks these pucks look just like tiny UFOs as they zoom straight at them, spinning so fast they slice through the treetops like butter. But the whole squad manages to dive out of the way just in time. Keaton screams that it's a UFO, an actual unidentified flying object, but Ranpai tells him she's got this whole thing under control. The princess warns everyone not to sleep on her because she's got the power of a crowned witch, and Ranpai promises he's going all in to help her out. Keaton was shaking a bit, but he still wanted to help, so he grabbed the sword and got into a stance, only for Ranpai to tell him he was holding it totally wrong. Ranpai grabs the bag and tells them they gotta stop the breakthrough first. Then she rips the clasp open with her teeth and chucks it into the air. This bag starts glowing whenever it gets close to anything flying, and then it just goes off in a massive explosion. The princess remembers that the Ranpai use potions that literally explode, and the saint finally realizes why she's known as the Witch of Hellfire. She's hyped that she won, but then she freezes when she sees those flying things don't have a single scratch on them, while Vale just brags about how strong they really are. Vale warns that these turtle monsters have the toughest shells in the world, but Ranpai steps up and says you can totally beat them just by flipping them over. Out of nowhere, these weird ropes shoot out of the turtle's head and snatch her hand, slowly wrapping around her entire body. The princess has no clue what these creepy tentacle turtles even are. Gobukichi tries his best to break the girl free, but he just can't do it, the orc. He whacks the turtle's shell, but it's so rock solid that his axe literally snaps in half, catching Ranpai completely off guard. One by one, these turtles sprout a bunch of tentacles from their heads that start creeping toward the squad, so the princess tells her husband to handle it, and he's totally on board. The turtles' gross tentacles slowly wrap right around the girl's neck. The saint takes a massive swing and absolutely smashes them to bits. Tentacle chunks go flying everywhere. Even the saint is. The Holy Lord asks Ranpai if she's doing okay. She says she's all good, and suddenly smoke starts puffing out of the turtle's head before the princess grabs one and realizes those sharp tentacles are their total weak spot. Everyone's totally confused because the team just wrecked those turtles. But it turns out those monsters she made were actually just the weakest of the bunch. Things are about to get way harder, since even tougher. The orc explains they can turn these skulls into armor and shields for the rest of the pack. Saint backs him up, and Vale tells the team to quit stalling and get moving. The princess pops up and says they're just there to check out some new monsters. But even when Ranpai warns her that the beasts ahead are way more dangerous, she just brushes it off and says they've got this. She claims her husband is way tougher than those world-ending disasters and is the strongest guy on the planet, leaving Ranpai totally shook. She's not buying the princess's story for a second, especially the part about her husband being the strongest guy ever. But she's not letting it get to her and decides to find a... The squad stops to rest in the forest, and Ranpai is totally shocked that the Holy Lord is actually way stronger than the immortal king and the dragon. She still can't wrap her head around one thing. Why would the human kingdom kick out the Holy Lord when he's literally the strongest guy around? The Holy Lord claims he's got 0 combat skills, but a god hooked him up with a crazy power that lets him unlock the full potential of anything he touches. Plus, this lord is packing a sacred ball, which totally catches Ranpai off guard. Kidan says that makes him nothing special, but Ranpai knows the saint's power is actually a total. Princess Platy married a total hunk, so now the mermaid kingdom is safe no matter if demons or humans try to attack. The sun is straight up blinding, and the princess says that even though the view hasn't changed, the heat is definitely cranking up. Out of nowhere, the dragon's voice cuts through the princess's thoughts as Vale announces the next stage is a total scorching hell, where monsters that love the heat are about to jump them. Suddenly, a bunch of monsters jumped out in front of the squad, and they were actually wolves with manes made of literal fire, forcing everyone to get on guard and drop into their battle stances. Vale warns that these hyena lichens are the deadliest 4-legged monsters around because they're fast, strong, and get even more powerful when things heat up. Vale brags that they've already won this battle of endurance and there's no way out. Then she asks Lord Saint how he's gonna handle these wolves right as the pack lunges straight for him. The princess and Ranpai are dying to know the answer too. Suddenly their faces twist in total shock as they can't believe what they're seeing. Every single wolf is... Everyone is totally confused, but then the immortal king explains that these hyena lichens can feel the Holy Lord's power, and instead of attacking, the wolves are actually looking at him like he... Lord Saint starts petting his soldiers like they're his own puppies, and even though he acts a bit annoyed, he's actually super happy about it. The squad is still trekking through that absolute furnace, and the whole time, those wolves are just stalking them from behind without even slowing down. The Immortal King explains that since these wolf monsters follow a strict rank system, they've officially accepted the Saint as their new leader. The wolves are just staring at Lord Saint sweetly, and he's totally confused but actually pretty hyped, saying he never expected them to like him this much without even using his special power. Pai realizes they're in a super high-level dungeon, and while the princess thinks they're in big trouble, Vale just wants a compliment while warning them that way scarier monsters are waiting ahead. With the wolves tagging along, the squad keeps pushing deeper into the Vale dungeon. Soon they stumble into a massive area that's totally buried in snow. The princess is super confused about. Vale says they've finally hit the end of her freezing hell dungeon, and just as the princess starts whining about going home, the Lord Saint suddenly whips around, and this bear was absolutely massive. It glared at the whole squad with pure rage. Even the Holy Lord was straight up terrified just by looking at it. The girls say this is the exact same insane power they felt when they first got here, and this beast is a whole head taller than the ones they saw before. The princess tells her husband to get out of there, but the crumpled guy warns that this monster is a total beast, and he doesn't want to wreck the whole place for nothing. The Lord knows he's totally trapped, so he turns back to face his teacher. The Immortal King's voice rings out, saying even this bear can feel the Holy Lord's insane strength. The Immortal King says it's the bear's destiny to take on the strongest, so the bear lets out a massive roar and charges straight in. The bear charges straight for the Saint, but a pack of wolves suddenly leaps out from behind the Lord to strike back. They swarm the bear from all sides, showing their master exactly how loyal they really are. The Saint admits he can't help at all, so he tells Pai to handle it, and she charges in with her rapier drawn to stop that bear from hitting her team. She moves like lightning and slices the bear's legs, making the beast roar in pain before it crashes straight to the ground. Pai says his paw is totally wrecked and he's stuck, so while the Saint thanks Mrs. Pai and the squad gets ready to bounce, Vale's voice suddenly cuts their friend off. She tells them to stay put and refuses to let it all end here, while the bear is out cold and Holy screams for the girls and the rest of the team to stop. He turns to his wife and asks for the medicine he told her to bring, while Platy and Ranpire stand there in total shock because the Saint is actually about to use it on a bear. Ranpire says if they just leave the bear alone he'll disappear, but if his enemies push their luck, he's gonna get absolutely furious. The Immortal King's voice is trying to turn that bear into pure mana, but the Veil tells him he can't just do whatever he wants, and the Saint looks over at the... Kadan starts second-guessing everything, but he's determined to save the bear because he's sure it's not there to fight, and must have a real reason for showing up. The princess is totally backed into a corner and has to hand the ointment to the Holy Lord, while Kadan says sorry to Rampai for making her work so hard to keep them safe. Rampai calls Lord Saint a total pushover who can't protect the kingdom or the princess, but he's already getting ready to make his move. Keaton tells Mr. Bear to start looking after himself so he can live a long life, but the bear just completely ignores the Holy Lord's advice. This totally set the Dragon Veil off, and she can't believe the team actually ignored her rules. She says she's got nothing left to lose now, except for her secret final move. Valsima suddenly drops onto the battlefield and tells them she's their opponent, leaving Ronpai shocked that the final boss is a dragon while Vale absolutely loves their reaction. She tells everyone to chill because this clown only has 1% of her strength, but even that tiny bit is enough to wipe out multiple cities. She orders the team to go all out, but Lord Saint Notice spots something moving fast just as a bear comes out of nowhere and smacks the dragon right in the head. The girls are just standing there totally frozen as the dragon starts fading away from that massive hit until it's completely gone, and Kanayan can't believe the bear actually wrecked the Veil clone. Keaton and the bear lock eyes for a second, leaving Sfiato totally confused. Then the bear suddenly whips around and heads for the horizon until it's completely out of sight. The Orking Doblins are basically calling me clueless, saying a monster like me could never understand how this bear feels. They claim this bear has way too much pride to just give up. Now, Okubo explains the bear is off on his own to become a beast their master will finally respect, and the Saint knows that means they'll definitely cross paths again. Up until now, she's just been fighting like crazy to protect whoever she wants. She didn't exactly save the world, but being kind enough to help anyone, even an enemy, is what real strength is all about. A bit later in Holy Lord Kidan's village, Vales the dragon stands there looking pretty smug, while Rufa complains that her new dungeon was a total flop. The Holy Lord walks up to the dragon and hooks her up with a tasty new meal, telling her it's a fresh dish called katsudon. While heading down the mountain, the Saint finally tracked down a bird monster with eggs, letting him cook the meal he's been dying to try thanks to the rebuilt dungeon of Vale. Saint says he's finally gonna level up his cooking, and when he looks at Vale, she totally melts with happiness as her eyes start to glow with pure joy and a bit of embarrassment. Sviatoa calls the whole group over to eat since the food is ready, but it isn't long before someone lets out a weird shout because the flavor is totally unlike anything they've ever tasted. The saint explains how the team finally scored those eggs they wanted while raiding the dungeon, and once they step outside, he notices the whole town is starting to buzz with life. The saintly lore is obsessed with the future, but he's clueless about what's going to happen to his village, and meanwhile, things are starting to get crazy deep in the woods. Two mysterious hooded figures are whispering to each other, totally confused about where they are, and shocked that a whole village is actually hidden in this spot. A whole squad was perched up in the trees, and their leader Aileron insisted on seeing everything for herself since she's the boss of this thief gang. We've got the wolf squad, Pochi, Pez, Khan, and Taro, and suddenly this Holy Lord tosses a bandage and tells his pack to go fetch. The Holy Lord explains that these are the same wolf monsters he found in the Veil dungeon who moved in with him, and as he pets one, he's totally blown away by how awesome it looks. Lord Saint says Pochi and the squad are doing a solid job clearing monsters from the dungeon, but there's one tiny issue. The wolves are already fighting over a single mouse they caught. Sviatoa realizes the wolves are totally out of food, but then a wild idea hits him. A little while later, he's busy prepping some meat when Veil walks over and asks what. The saint decides to whip up some dog food for his wolves, but Veil is totally annoyed that they're also eating all their supplies. Veil isn't laughing and literally spits fire, saying she'll handle the wolves alone, but Saint tells her to wait because those wolves are already part of the family. Veil's still not satisfied, so Saint pulls out his sword and gets ready to chop these guys up like ingredients. The saint is totally geeking out over his crazy ball because it slices food into tiny microscopic bits, while Veil is getting pretty annoyed that they're using her unholy sword to treat him so poorly. She's totally done with Lord Saint, and she's so mad that she's actually going to eat that weird dog creature using the food from a small barrel. Lord Saint says he's looking out for his dog's health by cutting out the extra fat and tossing in some veggies to keep the diet perfectly balanced. Lord Saint had one last thing on his mind. Would these dogs actually vibe with his cooking? Turns out he had nothing to worry about. The pups were totally obsessed with the food. Veil literally turned into a dragon just to beg for a bite, so Svartis gave in and told her to turn back into a human and hold out her hands. He pours her some dog food, and Veil's eyes sparkle as she looks at her hands full of kibble before she totally pounces on it. She picks through the dog food super carefully, complaining that it might be healthy but it still tastes like actual animal food, when suddenly her whole face changes. A creepy little smile starts to spread across her face. She turns her head toward one of the dogs. Even the dogs are totally freaked out by the way she's looking at them. Everyone is buzzing about this village because they can't wrap their heads around the insane fruits and veggies growing here, especially since even the wealthiest humans and demons don't have gardens this good. They realize someone is actually farming these fields, so one of the goons grabs a piece of fruit to try and tells his boss to take a bite, but the second he does, his whole face starts going numb. These fruits taste absolutely insane. Even the boss is about to take a bite. But then, she realizes something. She can't figure out what that mysterious smell hidden in the fruit is. One of the boss's servants warns everyone that they're being followed. She notices a bunch of weird-looking houses and strange gardens all over the place. This village is starting to look... The crew figures this place belongs to some rich nobles, so it's no wonder these fields are hidden way out in the middle of nowhere. The dude is totally lost, but the boss tells him there's probably some insane treasure hidden in this area. If they blow this huge chance, their rep as pro-thieves is totally toast, so the boss, Thunder Freezers, steps up and says they're gonna strip this entire mansion of every single treasure. The boss suddenly spots one of the Lord Saint's dogs spying on them from the bushes, while back at the building, the servant girl is already summoning massive magic circles in the sky. She was actually scoping out those waypoints, which are totally sketchy, and Belena says her job is to keep them ready for the Demon King and Queen Misastris. She thinks this job is a total waste since she only got to sing one song, so she started helping everyone with everything, which is wild because she actually used to work for the Demon King before moving here. 3 mermaids have stepped in to help out where they were short-staffed, which totally cleared her schedule and left the servants with way too much free time on their hands. She clenches her fist and starts panicking, thinking that if things keep going this way she's gonna lose her job and be left with absolutely nothing. She's not just gonna sit there, so she hunts for Lord Saint all over the mansion to ask for a job and finally finds him right in the middle of making pottery. The servant jumps in, totally confused by what the Holy Lord is doing, but the big boss just tells him he's busy molding a bowl out of clay. He says it's finally time to get some real pottery, and the servants are totally shocked to realize they've been eating off plates made of super rare, expensive metal. The saint says hand molding is taking way too long, so he starts spinning the pot to reshape it, and that's when the servant finally has a massive realization. Belena is super hyped to help the Light Lord, and while the Lord loves her energy, she warns her the job is going to be brutal. But the servant insists she's still ready to get to work. Belena reveals she's got psychic powers too, and the second she pumps magic into a pebble, it starts moving all on its own. That's basically the only magic she can pull off with a single pebble. She sticks the rock onto a spinning machine, secures it with some clay, and says a quick prayer. He holds his arms out as the machine starts cranking, and just as the Holy Lord is impressed by the henbane's work, the clay spins out of control and smacks him right in the... Lore of the Color tells henbane to slow down a bit, so she says sorry, and when Lord Saint notices how hard she's grinding, she just brushes it off and says she's not. She's working her heart out, but she's still not as good as his girlfriend or the others, so she's constantly asking for help just to make sure she doesn't lose her job. Lord Flower tells her not to sweat it and thanks her for the help with the pot. But henbane points out the thing is basically a pancake now, and she's done all she can, so Lord... She's glowing after his sweet words, but a bit later, they end up with a totally dented cup. Belena is ready to smash the thing, but Lord Saint stops her just in time while Anna tells her to chill because the first try is always a little messy. He's totally convinced they can still fix things, but henbane tells him to stop backing her up so hard, until a friend's voice cuts them off and they sprint toward the sound of wolves barking like crazy. They found a bunch of thieves all tied up, and when Lars asks what's going on, Okubo explains they caught these elven bandits raiding their farm. Elves are basically like demons, but they evolved totally separately, and even though Lord Saint thought they were allies, she says they actually want nothing to do with humans or demons. The servants heard that gangs of Elysian bandits were looting everything in sight, making them totally hated by both humans and demons. They've probably got a secret hideout that's impossible to break into. That's exactly why they're so hard to catch. Then the Saint shows up and says He tells the thieves they must have been shocked to find this farm, and when the boss asks who he is, the Saint reveals his name is Saint Kidden, and this is where he settled down. Everyone's whispering because Kidden is clearly just a human, and they're totally confused why he's hanging out with a demon. Plus, they have no clue that every single person... The Lord sees these thieves are totally clueless, so he asks the orc what happened, and the orc tells him they just swiped some tomatoes from the farm. Suddenly, a girl's voice cuts off the orc's story. And when the princess and dragon show up, they're totally losing it over their eaten tomatoes, so Vale transforms and... Sveta realizes there's no stopping Vale anymore, and the princess warns that if they don't let them walk away now, this whole mess is just gonna happen all over again. Vale tells the thieves they're getting executed to show everyone what happens when you mess with their home, leaving the whole crew absolutely paralyzed with fear. They're literally sobbing and begging for mercy, saying they'll quit their jobs right now. But then Belena's friend realizes she's seen them in the archives before as a group that only targets rich celebs and big-time traders. Most of the rich guys they hunted were super corrupt, just stealing tax money and taking bribes to get even richer. Once their dirty secrets were out in the open, Demon King Zedin made sure to. Vale says these invaders don't deserve a quick death, telling the thieves they better get ready, while the Lord of Color thinks for a second before agreeing that the princess is totally right. Lord Saint is ready to drop the hammer on some thieves, turning his gaze to the elven bandits who swiped 8 tomatoes from the farm and telling them they're in massive trouble for such a serious crime. So now they're all working for them, and while Belena was totally locked into Lord St. Caden's story, her face suddenly changed because she was super confused.